Welcome back to Creepy Nights, where darkness speaks and silence listens. Tonight's story will leave a mark, if you're brave enough to hear it. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. Have you ever boarded a train and realized halfway through the journey that something on it doesn't belong? Something not human? That was the question that haunted Claire when she stepped onto the 11:45 p.m. train to Chicago. It was a freezing November night, the kind of night when the fog clung to the tracks like a living thing. She had almost missed the last train out, but managed to sprint across the empty platform and slip inside just as the doors hissed shut. At first glance, the car looked ordinary. A handful of passengers sat scattered in their seats, faces half lit by the dim fluorescent bulbs overhead. The train hummed to life, jerking forward, and Claire settled into a corner seat near the back. But almost immediately, she felt it. A heaviness. A presence. As if someone or something was watching her. Claire tried to dismiss it as nerves. After all, she wasn't used to traveling this late at night. But as the train rattled down the tracks, she noticed strange details she couldn't shake. The conductor had passed through once to check tickets, but his eyes lingered on her too long, his expression unreadable, before he moved on. A man across the aisle sat stiffly, staring straight ahead without blinking. Another passenger, an old woman in a gray coat, muttered to herself constantly, whispering words that didn't sound like English. The strangest of all was a young boy sitting alone 2 rows up. His skin was pale, his head bowed, and he clutched something small in his hand. A toy train. The longer Claire watched, the more she realized he hadn't moved an inch since she boarded. Not a twitch. Not even the rise and fall of his chest. The fog outside grew thicker, swallowing the world beyond the glass. At times, it almost seemed like shadows moved within it, keeping pace with the train. Claire pulled her coat tighter. Something was wrong. She leaned toward the man across the aisle. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Do you know how long until the next stop?" The man turned his head slowly, too slowly. His eyes were pale, glassy, and his lips parted like he wanted to answer, but no sound came out. He just stared at her, unmoving. Claire recoiled. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed even further. A metallic groan echoed through the car, as if the train itself was protesting something. Claire glanced at the boy again, still motionless. But this time, his toy train wasn't in his hand. It was on the floor, right at her feet. Her heart skipped. She hadn't seen him move, not once. She bent down slowly, picking up the small toy. It was cold. Too cold. Like it had been sitting in a freezer. She looked up, intending to hand it back. But the boy's seat was empty. Claire's throat tightened. She scanned the car. He was gone. Just gone. The old woman in the gray coat suddenly stopped muttering. Her head snapped up, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, and she whispered, almost directly to Claire, "You shouldn't be here. This train isn't for the living." The words sank into Claire like ice water. Before she could respond, the train screeched violently, the lights went completely black, and every passenger seemed to turn their heads toward her at once, their faces stretched in unnatural ways, pale and wrong, as the darkness swallowed the car whole. And then, she heard it. A voice. Low. Whispering right beside her ear. "Why did you get on?" Claire froze, every muscle in her body locked as the whisper slithered into her ear. "Why did you get on?" Her breath caught in her throat. She spun around, but the seat beside her was empty. Empty, yet still warm, as if someone had been sitting there only a moment ago. The train rocked hard, almost throwing her from her seat. Then, just as suddenly as the blackout came, the lights sputtered back to life. The passengers looked normal again, or at least, mostly normal. The glassy-eyed man stared forward. The old woman had returned to her muttering, and yet, Claire knew. She knew what she'd seen, what she'd heard. Her heart pounded. She needed to get off at the next stop. Whatever this was, she didn't want any part of it. But when she glanced at the windows, her chest tightened. The fog was thicker than ever, pressed so close to the glass it looked solid. Worse, she realized with a shiver, it wasn't fog at all. It moved wrong, curling in shapes that looked like hands, like faces, pressing against the window as though they were trying to get in. She forced herself to look away. The conductor reappeared at the far end of the car, his boots echoing against the metal floor. He walked slowly, methodically, his cap shadowing his eyes. Claire's relief was short-lived. Something about his stride was wrong. Too stiff. Too deliberate. When he reached her row, he stopped. "Ticket." His voice was flat. Claire fumbled in her bag, handing him the crumpled paper. His gloved fingers brushed hers, ice cold, like touching stone pulled from a grave. He stared at the ticket for a long moment, then back at her. "You weren't supposed to board this train," he said. Her stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" But he didn't explain. He simply tucked the ticket into his pocket and moved on, continuing his slow patrol down the aisle. Claire watched him vanish into the next car, her hands trembling. She turned back, and her blood ran cold. The boy was back. He was sitting exactly where he had before, 2 rows up, head bowed, hands clutching the toy train that had been at her feet only minutes earlier. He hadn't moved a muscle. But now, his lips were moving, whispering. Claire strained to hear. It sounded like numbers, a countdown. 10, 9, 8. Her skin prickled. A countdown to what? Before she could move, the train lurched violently again, harder than before. The lights flickered, then dimmed until they barely glowed. A metallic screech roared from beneath the floorboards, as though the entire train was grinding against the rails. The old woman shrieked suddenly, pointing a gnarled finger at Claire. "It's her! She doesn't belong!" Every head in the car turned to face her, their eyes, too pale, too wide, locked onto her all at once. Claire's chest tightened as panic clawed up her throat. "Stop it! Leave me alone!" she shouted, rising to her feet. But they didn't stop staring. Not a blink. Not a breath. She backed toward the connecting door, desperate to escape into the next car. Her shaking hands fumbled with the handle, but just as she pulled it open, the boy's whispering grew louder. 3, 2, 1. The train screamed. Every bulb overhead exploded, plunging the car into darkness. Passengers howled, not in fear, but in voices that were wrong, warped, as though a dozen throats were speaking in unison. Claire stumbled through the door into the next car. It was empty. No seats, no passengers, nothing but a long, narrow corridor lit by a single flickering bulb at the far end. The door behind her slammed shut with a finality that made her blood run cold. She turned, pulling desperately, but the handle wouldn't budge. And then she heard it. The steady click-clack of footsteps, approaching from the other end of the corridor. Slow, measured, coming closer. But the light flickered just enough for her to see that no one was there. Just footsteps, growing louder, closer, relentless. Her back pressed against the sealed door. Her heart thundered so loud she thought it might burst. And then, right in front of her, an invisible voice whispered again, "You should never have boarded." The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. The single bulb above her flickered, buzzing faintly, as Claire pressed herself tighter against the sealed door. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She didn't want to move, didn't want to breathe. Then, tap. Something invisible brushed against her shoe. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. She stumbled backward down the corridor, even though she had nowhere to go. The faintest outline began to shimmer in the air before her, like heat rising off asphalt. At first, it was only a ripple. Then it began to take shape. A man's silhouette. Tall, broad shoulders. A long coat that seemed to sway though there was no wind. The air grew bitterly cold. Claire's voice cracked. Who are you?" The shape leaned forward. A whisper slipped from where its mouth should be. "The one who remembers." She bolted. The corridor stretched endlessly, longer than any train car could possibly be. Her footsteps echoed, swallowed by the oppressive dark. No matter how far she ran, the flickering bulb remained above her, unchanging. The impossible geometry made her dizzy. Finally, another door appeared ahead. She nearly sobbed with relief, slamming against it and fumbling with the latch. It groaned open. Claire stumbled into a new car, this one filled with passengers again. Dozens of them, men, women, children. Their faces were blank, featureless, like clay figures half-formed. They all sat perfectly still, heads tilted in the same unnatural angle, as though listening to something Claire couldn't hear. The door shut behind her with a metallic snap. She backed away, her heart pounding. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It's a dream. Just a dream." Then the passengers all turned their heads at once. Every single faceless figure swiveled toward her in eerie synchronization. Their necks cracked like dry branches. Though they had no eyes, no mouths, Claire felt their attention like a spotlight burning into her. She covered her face and screamed, "Wake up, please, wake up!" But nothing changed. One by one, the faceless passengers began to rise. The scraping of their shoes against the floor filled the air like a swarm of insects. They moved toward her, arms outstretched. Claire spun, grabbing the nearest loose object. An emergency hammer bolted beside the window. She yanked it free and smashed it against the glass. The pane spiderwebbed but didn't break. Again, another crack. A third time. This time, the glass gave way, exploding outward. Cold air rushed in. Beyond the window wasn't the outside world, though. No city lights, no moon, no rails, only endless black fog, roiling like storm clouds. Her stomach lurched. She had nowhere to go. The faceless passengers closed in, their fingers brushing the air inches from her skin. With a desperate cry, Claire hoisted herself through the jagged window, cutting her hands on the shards, and leapt into the darkness. She expected to fall, to tumble endlessly into the void. Instead, she landed hard on gravel. For a stunned moment, she lay there, chest heaving, staring up into pitch-black sky. Then she realized she was on solid ground. The tracks. She scrambled upright. The train was there, motionless on the rails. Its windows glowed faintly, shadows shifting inside. But the strangest part, it wasn't moving. The wheels weren't turning. Yet when she turned to look down the tracks, the scenery was sliding past. The trees, the signal lights. Everything was moving, except the train itself. Her blood froze. And then, behind her, she heard the whistle. Low, haunting. She turned. Another train was approaching. No, hurtling, straight toward her on the same track, its headlight burning white through the fog. Its roar was deafening, shaking the ground beneath her feet. Claire's legs wouldn't move. The train thundered closer, closer, the rails vibrating violently. She raised her hands to shield herself from the blinding light. And just before impact, she realized something impossible. The oncoming train had no engineer, no passengers. Every window was empty. Yet she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her from inside. And as the light engulfed her, she heard the same whisper again. "You shouldn't have boarded." The impact never came. Claire braced herself, waiting for the crushing weight of steel, for bone and blood to scatter across the tracks. But instead, the roaring train passed through her. The light blinded her. The scream of metal on rails shook her body. And yet, nothing touched her. She stood frozen in place as the monstrous locomotive tore past, each car a blur of shadow and emptiness. Her skin prickled with static as it swallowed her in its wake. When the final car vanished, silence returned. Claire gasped for air, trembling violently. The train she'd leapt from was gone. So were the tracks. She stood now in a barren field, flat and endless beneath a starless sky. The air was thick with the smell of iron. Her legs wobbled as she turned in circles. Nothing. No buildings, no lights, no sound. Just that endless black fog rolling at the horizon. Then, a faint click-clack. Her head whipped around. A track began to materialize only a few feet away, the steel rails glowing faintly in the dark. From the distance, a train approached. This one was smaller, slower, its single headlight weak and yellow. Claire hesitated, her heart pounding. She didn't want to board again. She couldn't. But where else could she go? As it drew closer, she realized something that made her blood run cold. It was the same train, the same cars, the same markings, even the same flickering light in the first window. It was looping back. With a screech, it ground to a halt in front of her, doors hissing open. Inside, the car was brightly lit, warm, even inviting. She saw ordinary passengers, chatting, reading, sipping coffee. It looked normal. Her legs ached, her lungs burned. Against every instinct, she stepped inside. The air was warm, almost comforting. A cheerful chime sounded as the train pulled forward again. Claire's shoulders sagged with relief, though her stomach twisted. Maybe it was over. Maybe she was safe. She slid into a seat and tried to steady her breathing. The man across from her glanced up from his newspaper and smiled politely. The old woman down the aisle was knitting quietly. A little boy played with a toy train. Her chest tightened. It was them. The same passengers, the same boy, the same old woman. Everything had reset, as though nothing had happened. Her voice was a broken whisper. No, this isn't real. The boy lifted his head for the first time. His face was pale, eyes sunken and hollow, and when he smiled, Claire saw teeth too sharp, too many. "You can't get off," he said softly. The old woman stopped knitting. The man lowered his newspaper. One by one, the other passengers turned toward Claire, their faces peeling open like cracked masks, revealing raw, twisted flesh beneath. The train lights dimmed to a blood-red glow. Claire bolted down the aisle, shoving past the inhuman passengers. She tore through the connecting door into the next car. This one wasn't normal either. It was a morgue. Rows of stretchers lined the car, each holding a body covered in stained white sheets. The air was heavy with rot and disinfectant. As she staggered forward, one of the bodies twitched. Then another, and another. Sheets slid away, revealing hollow-eyed corpses that sat upright in unison, their mouths opening in soundless screams. Claire stumbled backwards, slamming into the wall. Suddenly, the intercom above crackled to life. A voice spoke, calm, almost cheerful. "Next stop, nowhere. Passengers, please remain seated until your final destination." Her skin went cold. The corpses rose from their stretchers, shuffling toward her, their joints popping like broken hinges. She turned, sprinting to the far door. The latch resisted, but she threw her weight into it until it burst open. She tumbled into the next car and froze. This one was filled with mirrors. Floor to ceiling, every surface reflected her. Hundreds of her faces stared back, pale and terrified, every reflection slightly out of sync. Some moved a moment late, some didn't move at all, and one of the reflections smiled. The real Claire hadn't. Her reflection pressed its hand against the glass, lips curling wider and wider. The others began to follow, one by one, until every mirrored version of her was grinning with sharp, unnatural teeth. Her throat tightened. She backed away, but the reflections leaned forward as if trying to crawl through the glass. And then, the reflection that had smiled first whispered from 100 mirrored mouths at once, "You were never a passenger. You were always meant to drive." The mirrors rattled violently as if something inside them wanted out. Claire staggered backward, clutching her head. No, this isn't real. I'm not supposed to be here." But the reflections disagreed. They all leaned closer, pressing their palms flat against the glass. Their grins widened until the skin split at the edges of their mouths. One reflection whispered again, clearer now. "You were always meant to drive. Before Claire could respond, the mirrors cracked. Spiderweb fractures shot across every surface, the sound shrieking through the car like nails on metal. And then the glass shattered. Her reflection spilled forward, not as flesh, but as shadows. Black, writhing shapes poured out of the broken mirrors, wrapping around her like smoke. She fought, clawing and screaming, but the darkness seeped into her skin, filling her lungs, crawling behind her eyes. She collapsed to her knees. The train jolted violently. The intercom crackled again, calm and steady. "Attention passengers, your conductor has arrived." Her body felt heavy, her mind drowning in fog. She blinked, and suddenly, she was standing in the engine cab. The control panel stretched before her, dials and levers glowing faintly. The massive window looked out onto endless tracks vanishing into black mist. Her reflection in the glass wore a conductor's cap. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't me." But her hands moved on their own, gripping the throttle. The intercom buzzed. The passengers' voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, spoke in perfect unison. "Drive us home." Claire shook her head violently. "I don't belong here, I never did." The voice returned, softer, almost pitying. "You boarded the train at 11:45 p.m., Claire, but you never left the station." Her blood froze. Memories bled through the fog. She saw herself running across the platform that night, late, panicked. She remembered slipping on the icy concrete, the blinding pain, the scream of brakes. Her heart stopped. She hadn't boarded the train. She had fallen beneath it. The passengers, the whispers, the looping ride through fog and shadow. It wasn't a nightmare. It was her crossing. This wasn't a journey for the living. It was a train that carried the dead. Tears stung her eyes as the truth sank in. She was never supposed to walk off this train. Not now. Not ever. The shadows coiled tighter around her arms, guiding her hands across the controls. The train roared forward into the void, faster and faster, as the passengers whispered in chorus. "The train must always have a conductor. Now it's your turn." Claire screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the endless whistle. The tracks stretched on forever, and she drove. The opening question: have you ever boarded a train and realized halfway through the journey that something on it doesn't belong, something not human? Wasn't about the other passengers at all. It was about Claire. She was the one who didn't belong, not alive, not dead, trapped between both. And now, she was the one who would carry others into the fog, forever. Hello, everyone. Before this night ends, I need to tell you a story that was never meant to be heard. A story that sticks in your mind forever. So if you're brave enough, then turn off the lights, wear your headphones, and listen closely with rain sound and enjoy this 2 hours of bedtime story. Also, I love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? But don't say I didn't warn you, because after this, sleep won't come easy. What would you do if your own phone started receiving calls from your future self, calls that told you how you would die? It was 11:47 p.m. when Emily Ross's phone rang. She was half asleep, the TV flickering in the background, when the vibration buzzed across her nightstand. The screen lit up, and she frowned. Her own name was on the caller ID. Not unknown number, not private caller. It simply read, Emily Ross, mobile. She stared at it, frozen. The ringing cut through the silence of her apartment, each vibration rattling the wood beneath the phone. At first, she thought it was some kind of glitch, a spoofed call maybe, but something in her gut told her to answer. Against every shred of logic, she swiped the green icon and lifted it to her ear. Hello? At first, nothing, just a faint hiss of static, like wind rushing through a tunnel. Then, Emily. Her breath caught. The voice was her own, same tone, same cadence, but older, rougher, broken. Don't go outside tomorrow night. the voice said. "Please, you'll regret it." Emily's hand trembled so violently she almost dropped the phone. Her chest tightened as her future self's voice whispered urgently, "They're waiting for you. Don't answer the knock." Before she could respond, the call ended. The screen went black. She lay awake until morning, staring at the phone on her pillow. No missed call log, no incoming number. It was as though nothing had happened. By daylight, Emily convinced herself it had to be some dream, some bizarre trick her half-asleep brain had played on her. She went to work, answered emails, made small talk, and buried the memory. But the next night, the phone rang again. 11:47 p.m. Sharp. And again, her name lit up on the screen. Her hand hovered over it. Sweat dampened her palm. She shouldn't answer. She knew she shouldn't. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello?" This time there was no silence. The voice spoke instantly. "Emily, it's me. You don't have much time." Her throat tightened. "Who is this?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "You know who I am," the voice rasped. "You don't believe me now, but you will. Tomorrow evening, you'll hear a knock at your door. Don't answer it, no matter what." Emily's eyes darted to the door of her apartment as though something might already be waiting there. "Why?" she asked. The voice cracked with desperation. "Because if you do, you'll never see daylight again." Click. The call ended. The next 24 hours stretched into eternity. Emily couldn't focus at work. She kept glancing at her phone, half expecting it to light up again. By evening, her nerves were raw. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. At 9 p.m., she locked her front door, double-checked the windows, and sat on the couch with the TV blaring to drown out her thoughts. Then came the sound. 3 knocks. Sharp. Hollow. Deliberate. Her blood froze. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The knocks came again, louder this time, echoing through her tiny apartment. Emily. Her name. A voice outside. Low. Insistent. She scrambled for her phone, heart hammering against her ribs. It was 11:46, 1 minute before the usual call. The knocks grew violent, rattling the door on its hinges. Then, her phone lit up. 11:47. Her name on the caller ID. Emily clutched it, trembling, and answered with a shaky breath. On the other end was her own voice, screaming, "Don't open it! It's not human!" The line went dead, and in the silence that followed, Emily heard the sound of her doorknob slowly turning. Emily bolted upright from the couch, her pulse hammering in her ears. The doorknob rattled again, scraping as though something, or someone, was testing the lock. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Silence. Then a low chuckle. Not her neighbor, not anyone she knew. A slow, guttural sound that didn't belong to a human throat. She staggered backward, phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her screen was dark again, no trace of the call. Her reflection in the black glass looked pale, terrified, almost unfamiliar. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed in around her, heavy and suffocating. She held her breath, waiting, straining her ears. Nothing. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, she crept to her bedroom, locked the door, and curled under the blankets like a child hiding from a nightmare. Sleep never came. Morning brought a deceptive sense of safety. Sunlight spilled across her apartment, softening the shadows. She almost convinced herself it had been a hallucination born of exhaustion, until she saw the door. 3 deep scratches carved into the wood. Parallel grooves, as though something had dragged claws across the surface. Her knees nearly buckled. The building superintendent, Mr. Alvarez, frowned when she showed him. "Looks like vandalism. Kids, maybe." "Kids don't have claws," Emily whispered. "What?" "Nothing." She forced a smile, but her hands shook. That night, She packed a small bag and drove to her sister Rachel's house across town. Rachel was the opposite of Emily. Practical, grounded, always quick to roll her eyes at anything weird. When Emily told her what had happened, Rachel smirked. "Em, come on. You've been working 60 hours a week, living off coffee and microwave noodles. No wonder you're hallucinating." "It wasn't a hallucination," Emily snapped. "I heard myself, my voice. I warned myself not to open the door." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "And did you?" "No." "Then nothing happened." Emily swallowed, staring at the floor. "Not yet." Rachel sighed and handed her a glass of wine. "You need sleep, not ghost stories." But sleep never came at Rachel's either. At 11:47 p.m., the phone buzzed on the nightstand beside Emily's borrowed bed. Her name lit up the screen again. Emily's stomach lurched. She grabbed the phone and stumbled out of the guest room into the hallway. Rachel's house was quiet, her sister asleep upstairs. She answered. The voice was broken, breathless, urgent. "Emily, it's worse than I thought. They know you left. You can't run from them." Her knees weakened. "Who? Who's after me?" A long silence. Then, 3 words that froze her blood. "They're already inside." The line went dead. Emily whipped around, heart slamming against her ribs. The hallway stretched dark and silent. The living room below sat in shadow, and then she heard it. Soft footsteps. Not Rachel's. Too slow, too deliberate. She rushed upstairs, shaking Rachel awake. Get up now! Someone's in the house!" Rachel blinked, groggy. "What? No!" The sound of creaking floorboards cut her off. Someone was on the stairs. Rachel jumped up, now pale, now fully awake. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, but the line didn't connect. No ring, no signal. Just silence. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. Emily clutched her phone like a lifeline, whispering, "What do we do?" Rachel grabbed a lamp from the nightstand, holding it like a weapon. "We see who the hell it is." "No!" Emily hissed. "We can't open the door. I was warned." But the decision wasn't theirs. The bedroom door creaked open, slowly, painfully, as if someone, or something, enjoyed dragging out the moment. Both sisters froze. A shadow fell across the carpet. Not a person's shadow. Too long, too thin, stretching across the floor like liquid darkness. Rachel gasped. Emily's phone buzzed violently in her hand, the screen flashing. 11:47 p.m. again. Her own name. Her own number. She answered with trembling fingers. On the other end was her own voice, shrieking, "It's behind you!" Emily spun around at the scream in her ear. The shadow in the doorway stretched impossibly tall, its head nearly scraping the ceiling. Its limbs were grotesquely long, folding in and out of themselves like broken branches. But its face was worse than anything Emily had imagined. It was hers. A pale, distorted reflection of Emily's face stared back at her from the darkness, grinning too wide, the eyes hollow and glistening with black. Rachel dropped the lamp with a crash, stumbling backward. "What the hell?" The thing stepped into the room, its long arms scraping the walls. The temperature plummeted, breath fogging in the air. Emily's phone buzzed again in her hand, though she hadn't ended the call. Her own voice whispered through the receiver. "Run!" Rachel grabbed Emily's arm, yanking her toward the window. Without thinking, they shoved it open and climbed onto the roof of the porch. Cold air slapped their faces as they scrambled down the trellis and dropped into the yard below. Emily glanced back once. The figure leaned out of the upstairs window, its grin wider now, teeth impossibly sharp. It raised one hand in a slow wave. Her phone clicked. The call ended. They didn't go back inside. Instead, they sat in Rachel's car, doors locked, trembling. Rachel gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You want to tell me what the hell that thing was?" Emily shook her head. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. I don't know." But it's connected to the calls. It warned me not to open the door. It knew this was coming. Rachel barked out a nervous laugh. You're saying you warned you? From the future? Emily swallowed hard. I don't know, but the voice, it's mine. Older, broken, like it's been through hell. Rachel's gaze darted to the house. Every window was dark now, too dark. We can't stay here. Emily nodded. Then where do we go? They checked into a roadside motel an hour away. The clerk gave them odd looks, two pale women trembling as though they'd seen a ghost. Rachel collapsed onto the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Emily sat on the other bed, staring at her phone like it was a ticking bomb. 11:30. She had 17 minutes. Her pulse quickened with every passing second. She tried to shut it off, to pull the battery, but the phone resisted. No matter how many times she pressed the power button, the screen glowed stubbornly back at her. 11:46. Her breath came in shallow gasps. 11:47. The screen lit up. Emily Ross. Mobile. She answered. Emily! The voice was strained, urgent. You need to listen carefully. That thing, it wears your face because it knows you. It feeds on you. Every time you pick up the call, you let it closer. Emily's throat closed. Then why keep calling me? Because I'm trying to save us. I'm you. I've seen what happens. I've lived it. Her stomach turned. How do I know you're telling the truth? The voice cracked with despair. Because I know something only you would know. The night Mom died. You weren't asleep like you told Rachel. You were awake. You saw her take her last breath. Emily's chest constricted. No one else knew that. Not even Rachel. Her hand shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. What? What do I do? The voice whispered. Don't answer again. If you do, it wins. I'm only strong enough to call you 6 times. After that, I'm gone. And you'll be next. The line went dead. Emily sat frozen, staring at the screen. Rachel shifted under the covers. What did it say? Emily's lips trembled. It said I have to stop answering. Or it'll take me. Rachel frowned. Then throw the damn phone out the window. Emily almost did. She held it in her hand, ready to hurl it into the parking lot, but something inside her screamed, don't. If the voice was really her, if it really was trying to help, then destroying the phone might cut off her only lifeline. She set it down carefully on the nightstand instead. At 3:12 a.m., Emily woke to the sound of static. The phone was glowing faintly, even though no call was active. She leaned closer, heart racing. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Then the screen lit up without ringing. A video began to play, grainy, distorted, like a corrupted recording. Her stomach dropped. It was her. She was sitting on the very same motel bed she was on now. But her face was bruised, bloody, eyes swollen with terror. She leaned close to the camera and whispered, "It's already here." The video cut out, and from the corner of the motel room, in the shadows between the beds, came a low, rasping laugh. The laugh slithered through the motel room, low and guttural, vibrating in Emily's bones. She whipped her head toward the corner, but it was swallowed in darkness. Rachel sat bolt upright in bed, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Emily nodded, unable to speak. The phone on the nightstand buzzed violently, skittering across the surface like something alive. Rachel snatched the lamp from beside her bed and flipped it on. Light flooded the room. Empty. Nothing in the corner but peeling wallpaper and shadows. But Emily knew. It was still here. She picked up the phone with trembling fingers. The screen was black now, but warm, too warm, as if it had been running all night. "Emily," Rachel whispered, "we need to go. Now." They stumbled into the freezing night, breath puffing in the air as they hurried to Rachel's car. The motel parking lot was deserted, lit only by flickering yellow lamps. Rachel turned the key. Nothing. Dead engine. She tried again. The dashboard remained dark. Damn it! Rachel slammed the wheel. Battery's gone! Emily's phone lit up again. 11:47 p.m. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't even noticed the time ticking by. No, Emily whispered. Not now. Not here. The call came through. Emily Ross, mobile. Rachel grabbed her wrist before she could answer. Don't pick it up. You said not to. The phone kept buzzing, the sound drilling into Emily's skull. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the urge. It was stronger than ever now, like the phone wasn't calling her. It was pulling her. The buzzing stopped. For a brief, glorious second, relief washed over her. Then the back seat creaked. Rachel turned slowly, her breath catching. A figure sat hunched in the shadows behind them. Long limbs folded unnaturally, head bent so low its chin touched its chest. As it lifted its face, Emily's stomach lurched. It was her face again. But this time, it was smiling. Rachel screamed, fumbling for the door handle. The figure moved impossibly fast, slamming its hand against the window. The glass cracked under its touch, splintering like ice. Emily's phone buzzed again. Against every ounce of reason, she answered. The voice on the other end was hers, but hysterical now, breaking into sobs. You can't run, Emily. You let it in. Every time you answered, you opened the door wider. And now it's almost free. The figure in the back seat grinned wider, its teeth jagged and endless. Emily dropped the phone. Rachel yanked open the driver's door, dragging her sister out as they bolted across the lot. Behind them, the car windows exploded in a shower of glass. Something screamed inside the vehicle. A sound that wasn't human. They didn't stop running until they reached the dark woods behind the motel. Branches clawed at their clothes, thorns tearing at their skin. Rachel finally collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. What the hell is happening? What is that thing? Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know. But the voice, it's me. It says it's me from the future, that I'm trying to save myself. Rachel grabbed her shoulders, eyes wild. Then ask it. Ask what it wants. Ask how to stop it. Emily hesitated, then lifted the phone again. To her horror, the call was still active. She hadn't hung up. Hello? She whispered. The voice came through instantly. You can't stop it, Emily. Not yet. It's been following us for years. Every time we make a choice, every time we survive one night longer, it finds another way. The calls are the only way I can warn you. Emily's lips trembled. Why me? Why us? The voice broke, almost like it was crying. Because we answered the first time. We listened, and once you listen, you belong to it. Rachel leaned in, furious. Then how do we kill it? Silence. Then the voice whispered, We don't. We become it. The line went dead. Emily staggered back, bile rising in her throat. Rachel shook her head violently. No, we are not accepting that. There has to be a way out. Emily tried to respond, but her phone buzzed again. She looked down. A new message appeared on the screen. Play me. Her thumb trembled over the notification. Against every instinct, she tapped it. The screen filled with another grainy video. It was Rachel this time. Her face bloodied, eyes hollow, whispering through cracked lips. Don't trust me. Emily dropped the phone like it burned her. Rachel froze, staring at her. What did it say? Emily's heart pounded. Nothing. Just nothing. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Emily, show me. But Emily couldn't. She couldn't tell her sister what she had just seen. Because if the message was true, then the thing wearing her face wasn't the only one she had to fear. And from the darkness of the woods around them, the laugh came again. Closer this time. The laugh echoed through the trees, weaving between the branches like smoke. Emily spun in circles, clutching her phone, her pulse a drumbeat of panic. Rachel grabbed her arm. Em, we have to move, now! But Emily froze, her mind replaying the video. The bloodied Rachel whispering, Don't trust me. Her mouth went dry. Her own sister, the only person she trusted, might not be safe, might not even be human. "Emily!" Rachel shook her. "Stay with me!" The shadows shifted around them. A branch snapped. Leaves rustled, though no wind blew. Something was circling them. Emily swallowed hard. "Where are we going?" Rachel pointed deeper into the woods. "There's a ranger station about a mile from here. If we can get there, maybe call for help." Emily wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe Rachel was still her sister. But the warning looped in her mind. "Don't trust me." They stumbled through the dark forest, twigs snapping underfoot. The trees seemed to close in tighter with each step, the woods unnaturally silent. No crickets, no owls, just the sound of their own ragged breathing. Every few minutes, Emily glanced at Rachel, searching her face for some sign. Was her smile too forced? Were her eyes too dark? Was she still Rachel at all? "Almost there," Rachel whispered, though her voice trembled. "Just a little further." Emily's phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, heart hammering, a text message this time. "Stop. She isn't your sister anymore." Her stomach lurched. She looked at Rachel walking ahead, her silhouette framed by moonlight. The phone buzzed again. She's wearing her face, just like the others. Emily slowed, clutching the device as if it were the only truth she had left. Her throat burned with fear. Rachel turned, frowning. "What is it? Why'd you stop?" Emily shoved the phone behind her back. Nothing. Just catching my breath." Rachel studied her for a long moment, her eyes glinting strangely in the dark. Then she nodded. "Okay, let's go." They finally broke through the tree line into a clearing. A small cabin stood at the far edge, a dim light glowing in the window. Relief surged through Emily until her phone buzzed again. "It's a trap! Don't go inside!" Her chest tightened. She stared at the cabin, then at Rachel, who was already running toward it. "Come on!" Rachel shouted. Emily hesitated, every muscle in her body screaming in confusion. Which warning was real? Which danger was worse? The thing outside or the thing walking beside her? Rachel reached the door of the cabin, yanking it open. Warm light spilled out, cutting through the dark. "Emily, hurry!" Emily's phone buzzed violently. She glanced down. Another video had appeared. Her own face this time. Pale, terrified, whispering into the camera. "If you walk through that door, you'll never come back out." Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "Emily!" Rachel's voice snapped her head up. "Now!" She forced her legs forward, stumbling across the clearing. Her heart slammed in her chest with every step. The phone burned in her palm, its screen glowing brighter, pulsing like it was alive. Rachel held the door open, her face glowing in the warm yellow light. "We're safe now." Something in her voice made Emily's stomach twist. Too calm, too certain. Emily stopped just short of the doorway. "You go first." Rachel's smile faltered. For a heartbeat, her expression cracked, her lips stretching too wide, her teeth too sharp in the glow. Then she recovered. "Emily, don't be ridiculous. Just come in." Emily's phone buzzed again. She glanced down. "This is call number 5. One more and it's over. Listen to me." Her hand trembled as she answered. The voice on the other end was frantic, almost incoherent. "Emily, please don't go inside. That's not Rachel. She didn't make it past the motel. You've been walking with it the whole time." Emily's legs buckled. No, that's not true." The voice cracked with desperation. "Why do you think I only have 6 calls? Because that's how many times it takes before we become it. If you walk through that door, the cycle completes. We're trapped forever." Emily raised her eyes. Rachel stood framed in the doorway, her smile too wide now, her eyes glinting with something inhuman. "Emily," she whispered, "come home." The call went dead, and from inside the cabin, a second voice echoed out, Rachel's voice, weak, faint, terrified. "Em, help me." Emily's world spun. 2 Rachels, One in the doorway, smiling, one crying for help inside. Her knees weakened, her phone buzzing one last time in her hand. Next call is the last. Make your choice. Some stories are just stories, and in some are warnings. Tonight's tale was hidden for a reason, but now it's yours. Turn off the lights and listen closely. Have you ever driven for hours on an endless stretch of road, so tired that you weren't sure if your eyes were playing tricks on you? Earl Henderson had been behind the wheel of his 18-wheeler for nearly 14 hours straight. The long haul from Arizona to Oklahoma was a route he had driven dozens of times before. Same barren desert roads, same quiet highways, same empty night sky with its stars stretched wide like spilled salt. But this night was different. His CB radio had gone silent hours ago. The last gas station he passed was boarded up, broken pumps standing like forgotten grave markers. The further he drove, the more his headlights revealed only nothing. No signs of life. Not a single car passed him, not one. That's when he saw it. A glowing neon sign in the distance. Last chance truck stop. Food, gas, motel. Relief washed over him. His fuel gauge was dangerously close to E. His stomach growled. His eyelids drooped. A hot meal and a bed sounded like salvation. The place looked alive. Too alive. Bright neon lights buzzed. A few semi-trucks were parked outside. Music leaked faintly from the diner. Through the dusty windows he saw people. Truckers hunched over coffee mugs, waitresses sliding plates across counters. He parked his rig, stepped out, and instantly felt something was off. The air was colder. The wind had stopped. The highway behind him looked darker than it should. He brushed it off and pushed through the diner's door, greeted by the smell of bacon and stale coffee. "Sit anywhere, hun," a waitress said, not looking at him. He sat. His boots echoed too loudly against the floor. The other truckers in the diner didn't look up, didn't blink, didn't move. Like they were frozen in place. Earl's mouth went dry. He waved at the waitress again. That's when he noticed. The coffee pot in her hand wasn't pouring. The liquid inside wasn't moving. Neither was the steam from the griddle behind the counter. Everything had stopped mid-motion, like a photograph. And then, all at once, every head in the diner turned toward him. Every single one. The waitress leaned down, her voice low and cold, whispering words that sent a shiver crawling up his spine. "You shouldn't have found this place." The storm seemed to roll in faster than Mike could comprehend. 1 minute the horizon was clear, the next it was swallowed by ink-black clouds. Rain lashed against his windshield, wipers struggling to keep up. The GPS glitched again. The glowing arrow spun in circles, then pointed him toward a stretch of road he swore he had never seen before. It wasn't paved like the rest of the interstate. It was narrower, darker, almost as if it had been carved through the woods by hand. A pit twisted in Mike's stomach. Truckers had an unspoken rule. Never take a road you didn't know, especially in weather like this. But the highway ahead was blocked by flashing hazard lights, and the GPS kept insisting, "Turn right, Highway 19. With no other choice, he eased the rig onto the forgotten road. The trees leaned in close, branches clawing against his trailer like skeletal hands. The storm above seemed muted here, the rain slowing, though the air grew impossibly heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth. Mike's hands tightened on the wheel. Something about this road felt wrong, like it hadn't seen another vehicle in years. His headlights caught faded road signs, riddled with bullet holes, words so rusted they were unreadable. The deeper he drove, the quieter it became, until all he could hear was the low rumble of his engine. That's when he saw her. A figure appeared in the beam of his headlights, standing dead center in the road. A woman. Pale, drenched, with long black hair plastered across her face. Her dress clung to her body, soaked and mud-stained. Mike's heart hammered. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching against the slick asphalt. The truck lurched, stopping just feet from her. For a moment, she didn't didn't flinch, just stood there, staring at him. Or at least, he thought she was staring. He couldn't see her eyes through the curtain of wet hair. Mike leaned forward, blinking hard. Maybe it was just the storm messing with him, or the fatigue of a long haul. But no, she was real. She was there. He rolled down the window slightly, rain spraying inside. "Hey, you okay out there?" he shouted. The woman didn't answer. She tilted her head slowly, unnaturally, like a broken doll trying to make sense of him. Something about that movement made Mike's skin crawl. He reached for the CB radio, hand shaking, but all he got was static. Then, without warning, the woman's lips parted. She mouthed something, silent, deliberate. 2 words. "Turn back." The lights inside Mike's cab flickered. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared back to life. His pulse was racing now, sweat cold on his neck despite the storm outside. He blinked, and she was gone, not walking away, not fading into the trees, just gone. Mike's knuckles turned white around the wheel. Every instinct screamed at him to throw the truck into reverse and get off this cursed road. But when he glanced in the mirrors, the way back was gone too. The road behind him had dissolved into thick, impenetrable fog. He was trapped. He gritted his teeth, shifted gears, and pressed forward. The only way out was through. The road ahead seemed to stretch longer and longer, as if it were pulling him deeper into the woods. He adjusted his rearview mirror again, half hoping, half dreading to see that woman behind him. But what he saw was worse. In the mirror, the road wasn't empty. It was lined with people. Dozens of them, standing silently in the rain, their faces hidden, their clothes tattered, their eyes reflecting the dim red glow of his taillights. And they were all watching him. Have you ever felt like the road itself was alive, breathing, waiting, and watching? Hank was beginning to. The diner had felt too quiet, the waitress too detached, and the man at the end of the counter too knowing. As Hank pulled his rig back onto Route 190, the storm had broken loose in full force. Sheets of rain pounded the windshield like fists, and the wipers barely kept up. The world outside became nothing but shadow, streaks of lightning, and the long scream of asphalt. He pressed the accelerator harder, desperate to put distance between himself and the diner. His CB radio crackled suddenly, though he hadn't touched the dial. "You can't outrun it, Hank." The voice was low, metallic, warped by static. Hank froze. He hadn't broadcasted. Nobody should have known his name. "Who is this?" he shouted, gripping the mic. "Identify yourself." The only answer was the sound of labored breathing, heavy and wet, like someone gasping through a crushed throat. Hank slammed the radio off, but then came the headlights. At first, Hank thought it was just another rig, maybe a local trucker hauling through the storm. The twin beams appeared in his mirrors, far back, then drawing closer. Too fast. Way too fast. Hank kept steady on the gas, but the truck behind him closed the gap like a predator scenting blood. Its headlights flared white-hot in the rain, blinding him. Then, without warning, it disappeared. Gone. Hank's heart hammered in his chest. He hadn't passed an exit. There'd been nowhere for it to go. Yet the mirrors showed only blackness now, just his own headlights carving the storm. He tried to convince himself he was tired, hallucinating. But then, the CB crackled again, even though it was still off. "Mile 247, Hank, that's where it happened." His stomach dropped. The waitress had mentioned the same mile. The dead mile. Hank's hands slicked the wheel with sweat. He remembered trucker lore, ghost stories told at rest stops, about phantom rigs that chased the living until they ran themselves off the road. But this wasn't a story anymore. As if answering his fear, the phantom truck appeared again, this time ahead of him. No taillights, no brake lights, just a hulking shadow in the rain, occupying the center of the road. Hank yanked the wheel, swerving into the other lane. His own horn screamed as his trailer fishtailed, barely missing the phantom rig's bumper. But when he looked again, there was nothing. Only open highway stretching into the storm. Breathing ragged, Hank glanced at the dash clock. Mile 245. 2 miles until 247. The storm seemed to grow thicker, heavier, as if the road itself wanted to keep him there. The rain drummed like war drums. His headlights caught movement on the roadside, shapes standing just beyond the trees, human shapes. Hank squinted. They were lined up in rows, motionless, pale faces reflecting the lightning, watching, waiting. His skin prickled as he passed them. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there like mourners at some endless roadside funeral. Finally, the green mile marker appeared through the sheets of water. 247. The CB shrieked to life without warning, deafening in the cab. "Do you remember it now, Hank?" the voice rasped. And in that moment, Hank saw something on the road that froze him to the bone. A semi, jackknifed across both lanes. Its cab crushed, windshield shattered, flames licking the wreck. And inside, slumped against the wheel, was a man. Not just any man, it was Hank. The storm swallowed the sound of his scream as the scene flickered in and out of existence like a broken film reel. Then, gone. The road was empty again, the only wreckage the pounding of his heart. But Hank knew. He hadn't imagined it. Something had happened here. Something to him. Hank has just seen his own mangled corpse inside a phantom wreck at mile 247. What really happened here, and why is he being haunted? The silence in the cab felt suffocating, broken only by the steady drone of the engine and the whine of tires on asphalt. Jack's mind raced, replaying what he'd just seen. The man on the road, the impossible fade into nothingness, and then the face in the side mirror, watching him from the sleeper berth like it had been riding with him all along. He dared a glance into the mirror again. Nothing. The berth was empty, shadows draped neatly across the blanket he hadn't touched in hours. His chest heaved as if he'd just run a mile, his hands shaking on the wheel. "You're tired, Jack. Too many hours. That's all this is," he muttered, trying to steady himself. But then, a sound. Not outside, not in his head. From inside the cab, a slow, deliberate breathing. It came from directly behind him, soft but steady, as if someone was seated quietly on the edge of the bed. Jack's throat tightened. His instinct screamed at him to keep driving, to not look back. But human curiosity, it was a curse. He reached up, clicked on the dim amber cab light, and inched his head around. The berth was empty, perfectly empty. But the blanket, he swore it had shifted, like someone had just lain down and got back up. Suddenly, his CB radio hissed again. "Jack!" The voice was drawn out, low and wrong, like the syllables were melting. "You missed your stop." His hand shot to the radio and yanked the plug free, killing it. The hiss died instantly, replaced once more by silence, and then, his phone lit up on the dashboard. Unknown number, a text message. He hesitated, then tapped the screen. "Check your back seat." His heart almost stopped. Back seat? The rig didn't have a back seat. With a trembling hand, Jack angled the phone like a mirror to the dark glass window behind him. For half a second, he thought it was just his reflection. But then the other Jack in the phone's glass smiled, wide, unnatural, too many teeth, while he himself was stone still. Jack slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded across the asphalt, tires screaming. The force threw him forward, nearly slamming his head against the steering wheel. When the 18-wheeler finally lurched to a stop in the middle of the dark two-lane road, his body shook with adrenaline. His headlights lit up the empty stretch ahead. Nothing but trees, black and endless. And then, movement. At the very edge of the headlights, something stepped into view. A man. No, the man. The hitchhiker. He was standing dead center in the road, his face half turned toward Jack's truck. His skin looked even paler now, gray under the harsh beams, and his lips were moving as if whispering something Jack couldn't hear. Jack leaned forward, straining to read his expression. And then the hitchhiker raised his hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed straight at Jack. Jack's blood ran cold. He reached for the ignition, desperate to put the truck back in gear and floor it. But before he could move, his headlights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Pitch black swallowed him. You think you know the rules of the road, but what if I told you? This highway was never meant for the living. The engine roared as Mark pressed the pedal harder, trying to outrun the impossible. But no matter how fast he drove, the road stretched endlessly ahead, an infinite ribbon of black asphalt lined with dead trees and broken signs pointing nowhere. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, but the truck almost seemed to steer itself now, like it was on rails. The radio clicked on again, this time a woman's voice, soft, familiar. Mark, you shouldn't have left me. He froze. His late wife. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, that's not real. But her voice kept coming, calm yet laced with accusation. You left me in that hospital bed, alone, just like you leave everyone. His chest tightened, tears stinging his eyes. The voice was inside him now, louder than the engine, louder than the storm outside. He slammed the radio off, but the sound didn't stop. The CB crackled again. A man's voice replaced hers. Exit 13, 1 mile ahead. Don't miss it, driver. Mark squinted through the rain-streaked windshield. A crooked green sign flickered into view. Exit 13. Dead End Road. The same words painted in blood on the map. He didn't want to, but his hands moved as if commanded, cranking the wheel toward the ramp. The truck heaved onto the exit, tires screeching as if resisting the turn. The ramp wound downward like a spiral, each curve tighter, each shadow darker. When the truck finally leveled, Mark saw it. A single building stood at the end of the road, a flickering neon sign above it. Last Stop Diner. Every window glowed faintly yellow, but the parking lot was empty. The rain stopped as if the storm had been cut off by invisible hands. The world grew unnaturally silent. Mark parked, trembling, and stepped out. The diner's door creaked open before he touched it, as if expecting him. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and burnt grease, and there they were. Dozens of truckers scattered across the booths, motionless, pale, eyes open, staring, but not blinking. Coffee cups in their hands, food half-eaten on their plates, as if frozen mid-meal. Mark's stomach turned. These were the missing drivers, every single one of them. And then, one of them moved. A man in the far booth turned his head slowly, mechanical, his eyes hollow but locked on Mark. You finally made it, the man said, his voice low and gravelly. We've been waiting for you. Mark stumbled back, but the others began moving too. Their heads turned in unison. Some rose from their seats. Their voices merged into a chilling chorus. Welcome to the last mile, driver. Mark bolted for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. He ran to the counter, searching for another way out, when he noticed the jukebox in the corner flicker to life. It wasn't music. It was a recording of his own voice. This is Mark Holloway, heading east on I-90. If anyone finds this tape, it means I didn't make it. His heart dropped. He'd never recorded anything. The floorboards rattled beneath him. The truckers' bodies twitched, jerking toward him like marionettes. The diner seemed to pulse, the walls breathing in and out. And then, behind the counter, a figure emerged. Tall, thin, wearing a trucker's cap pulled low, face obscured in shadow. But Mark knew, deep in his bones, who it was. It was him. An older version of himself. Same jacket, same scars, same weary eyes. The doppelganger grinned. You've been driving in circles, Mark, the figure said. Every mile you've driven has led you here. The road doesn't end because you don't end. You're already one of us. Mark shook his head violently. No, no, I'm alive. I'm still alive. The older Mark stepped closer, placing a cold, heavy hand on his shoulder. Not anymore. The The jukebox clicked off. The lights flickered, and every trucker in the diner whispered the same words together, their voices filling the air like the roar of an engine. The road goes on forever. The last thing Mark saw was his own reflection in the diner window, not moving with him, but smiling back long after he stopped. Mark had never been alive on that road. He was just another lost driver, doomed to repeat his final haul forever on the highway that never ends, the last mile. Have you ever wondered what happens to the patient's history forgot? The ones erased from every record, every file, every memory? The demolition crew thought it would be an ordinary job. Knock down the abandoned Ravenswood State Asylum, haul out the debris, and collect their pay. But Ravenswood wasn't ordinary. It was infamous. The asylum had been closed since the early 1970s after a series of unexplained deaths. Over the years, urban explorers broke in, kids dared each other to spend the night, and ghost hunters claimed to hear screams in the dark. But no one stayed long. The place seemed to breathe, as if the walls themselves remembered the madness they once contained. On the first day of demolition, the crew gathered outside the fenced-off compound. The morning fog clung to the ground, wrapping the cracked pavement in a suffocating gray veil. "Looks like hell threw up on this place," muttered Mike, the site supervisor. He spat on the ground and motioned for his men to follow. The asylum loomed before them, 6 stories of rotting brick and broken windows. Ivy crawled up its sides like veins on a corpse. The main entrance doors, once painted white, had turned a sickly yellow. Above them, faded letters still spelled Ravenswood State Hospital for the Insane. Inside, the air was heavy with mold and dust. The halls were lined with peeling paint, and the smell of mildew mixed with something else, something faintly metallic, like dried blood. The first 2 days went smoothly. The crew began clearing out the old wards, tossing broken furniture and rusted bed frames into dumpsters. But on the 3rd day, something strange happened. While ripping apart a filing room on the 2nd floor, one worker named Eddie discovered a locked cabinet bolted into the wall. He pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were patient records, hundreds of them, stuffed into thick manila folders. Nothing unusual, except the patient numbers didn't match the hospital's official archives. "Hey Mike, you better take a look at this," Eddie called. Mike squinted at the files. Patient number 31, unknown name. Patient number 32, identity withheld. Every record was incomplete. No birth dates, no next of kin, just notes scribbled in shaky handwriting. And one thing stood out. Each file ended with the same phrase stamped in red ink: "Do not transfer. Do not release." "What the hell?" Mike muttered. That night, Mike took one of the files home. He couldn't shake the unease. Flipping through it, he found disturbing notes. Subject shows signs of advanced schizophrenia, paranoia, violent outbursts. Patient insists someone lives in the walls, refuses food, speaks in whispers to unknown entities. But the last entry froze him. Patient 1031 has disappeared from his cell. Search underway. Possible staff error. Do not report. The file ended there. No closure, no transfer records, just nothing. The next morning, the crew returned. They were tasked with tearing down the old East Wing, where the worst patients had once been kept. Most of the cells were empty, just rusted bed frames and bars, but one door wouldn't budge. "Probably rusted shut," Eddie said, forcing a crowbar between the hinges. But when they finally pried it open, every man in the hallway went silent. The cell looked untouched. While the rest of the asylum had rotted, this room was preserved as if time had stopped. The walls were clean. The sheets on the bed were neatly folded. And on the desk sat a journal, perfectly placed in the center. Mike stepped inside, his boots echoing on the floor. He picked up the journal. The cover was leather, cracked with age. He flipped it open. The first page read, "Patient number 31. My name has been erased. They want me forgotten. But I am still here." The crew exchanged nervous looks. Then, from the corner of the room, they heard it. A whisper. So faint, it was almost impossible to catch. "Leave!" Eddie's face went pale. "Did you hear that?" Mike's throat tightened. The whisper came again, slightly louder this time. "Leave this place!" The men bolted out of the cell, slamming the door behind them. But as the door clicked shut, the sound echoed through the hallway. The faint scrape of someone dragging their nails across the inside of the door. Mike clutched the journal to his chest, his heart pounding. And for the first time, he realized the truth. The cell had never been empty. Mike didn't sleep that night. The journal sat on his kitchen table, staring at him like an open wound. He had tried, God, he had tried, to put it away, to shove it back into his duffel bag and pretend it wasn't there. But every time he looked at it, the leather seemed darker, wetter somehow, as if it had been pulled from something still alive. The words replayed in his head. "My name has been erased. They want me forgotten. But I am still here. Still here." He poured himself another drink, hoping whiskey would burn away the unease clinging to him, but even that didn't help. At 3:17 a.m., a sound echoed in his house. A faint scratching, like fingernails trailing against wood. His heart stopped. He lived alone. The sound wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from his hallway. Mike froze, listening. The scratching moved slowly, dragging across the walls of his narrow corridor until it stopped right outside his bedroom door. He clenched his fists, trying to convince himself it was a rat. Old house, old walls, nothing more. But then came the whisper. "Leave." He didn't open the door. He didn't dare. He stayed perfectly still in his bed until dawn bled through the blinds, and only then did the sound fade. By the next morning, Mike looked like hell. Bloodshot eyes, unshaven, and a silence about him that made the rest of the crew uneasy. But he said nothing. He only carried the journal tucked under his arm, as if he couldn't bear to leave it behind. The men gathered in the east wing again, staring at the locked cell they had sworn never to open again. Nobody wanted to talk about what they had heard yesterday, but the silence between them said enough. "Let's just seal this section off," Eddie muttered, wiping sweat from his brow even though the morning was cool. "Tear down the other side first. We don't need to mess with that." But Mike shook his head. "We finished the wing. That's the job." His voice was flat, like someone speaking from a great distance. "That cell isn't empty, and we need to know why." The others exchanged glances, but no one argued. You didn't argue with the boss, not when he looked like that. They worked through the morning, clearing the other cells, breaking down rusted doors, ripping apart the walls. Yet every few minutes, someone would glance toward the sealed cell. It sat at the end of the hallway, door bolted shut again, but it felt like an open eye watching them work. Around noon, Eddie wandered too close to it. He swore he heard something moving inside, a shuffle, a slow dragging sound like feet sliding across the floor. He pressed his ear to the cold metal. The whisper came again. "Hungry." Eddie stumbled back, nearly tripping over a pile of broken bed frames. His face had gone pale. "Mike," he hissed, "something's in there. I swear to God, there's something still in that room." The crew laughed nervously, but their voices shook. Nobody wanted to admit it, but they had heard it too. That night, Mike finally opened the journal again. He sat in his truck outside the asylum, engine off, the moonlight barely enough to read the faded handwriting. The entries were strange, half journal, half confession, written in shaky, frantic script. "They keep me here because I know the truth. I am not mad. They are. The doctors feed me lies. The walls listen. The walls breathe. If I stop writing, I will cease to exist. I must write to stay alive." The next entry was worse. "I hear them at night. The others. Not the patients, the ones behind the walls. They whisper in my voice now. They promise freedom if I let them in. But I know what they are. I know what they want. Mike turned the page with trembling hands. I have stopped eating. They cannot kill me if I am not alive to kill. But I will not die. I will wait. I will wait until they open the door again. Someone always opens the door again. Mike slammed the journal shut, heart pounding. A cold sweat slicked his skin. He looked up at the asylum, its silhouette black against the moonlight. And for the first time since they had started demolition, he felt certain that the building wasn't just abandoned. It was waiting. The next morning, the men found the east wing destroyed. At first, they thought vandals had broken in. Bricks smashed, doors ripped from their hinges, debris scattered everywhere. But as they walked deeper into the wing, horror set in. The destruction wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It was deliberate. The walls had been clawed. Deep gouges cut through plaster and brick, long streaks like nails dragged by something desperate or inhuman. And then they saw it. The locked cell door had been torn open from the inside. The bed was overturned, the sheets shredded, the desk splintered, and in the middle of the room, etched deep into the floorboards with what looked like broken fingernails, were 3 words. Still here now. The East Wing was no longer a job site. It was a crime scene. Mike stood frozen in the doorway of the ruined cell, his throat tight, his hands trembling despite himself. He had worked demolition for over 20 years, seen dead animals rotting under floorboards, pulled bodies out of condemned houses that doubled as drug dens. But this was different. This wasn't decay. This was intent. The gouges in the walls weren't the random scratches of a madman. They were words, broken into fragments. Let me in. Still breathing. Feed me. Some were written backward, as if meant to be read from inside the wall itself. And those words carved into the floorboards, still here now, seemed to pulse, like the wood itself throbbed with a heartbeat. The men stood in silence, no one willing to step closer. Finally, Eddie whispered, "This isn't right. We need to stop. Call someone. Police, the city, I don't care who. This ain't just a building anymore." But Mike shook his head. His voice was quiet, almost hollow, but there was a strange weight in it. "No, we keep going. If we walk away now, it'll follow us." "Follow us?" Eddie barked. "Listen to yourself. You sound like one of those lunatics that used to live here." Mike's eyes didn't move from the floor. "Maybe I do. But tell me you don't feel it. Tell me you don't feel it watching us." And the truth was, they all did. The air in the East Wing felt thicker, heavier. Each breath tasted like rust and ash. The flicker of their work lights made shadows stretch unnaturally long, bending into shapes that seemed almost human before sliding back into the corners. That night they gathered in the site office, too shaken to go home. Nobody admitted it, but each man was terrified of being alone. The journal lay on the desk between them, its cracked leather cover like a wound none of them wanted to touch. Finally, Eddie snapped. He grabbed the book and flipped it open. "We need answers. I don't care how crazy this crap sounds. Maybe it'll tell us what we're dealing with." The pages seemed to hum under his fingers. The writing grew more frantic with each entry, the patient's words breaking into jagged scrawls, whole paragraphs crossed out violently. But between the madness, certain passages stood out. They said I was violent. They said I attacked the nurses, but I never touched them. It was the shadows, the ones that whisper when the lights go out. They move through the walls like water. They want skin. They want voices. I only screamed to drown them out. The next page. The doctors thought they locked me away, but they locked it away with me. It needs me to open the door. It cannot exist without a host, without a name. That's why they erased me. If I do not exist, neither does it. But it is patient. It waits. And I am growing weak. The men sat in silence. The words seemed to echo inside the room, as if the patient himself were whispering them aloud. Eddie slammed the book shut, his hands shaking. "This is bullshit. Just some crazy guys rambling, that's all." But his denial didn't last. because when they stepped outside the office, the asylum was different. The fog had rolled in thick, swallowing the grounds in a suffocating gray. The floodlights they had set up to illuminate the worksite flickered one by one, casting the asylum into half-darkness. And from somewhere inside the east wing came a sound. Not footsteps, not voices. Something worse, a dragging, slow, deliberate, like something pulling itself across the floor with broken limbs. The men froze, listening. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was clear it wasn't echoing from inside the building at all. It was circling the office trailer. Eddie swore under his breath, fumbling for the flashlight on his belt. He swung the beam through the fog, but it caught only shifting white mist and the skeletal outline of the asylum beyond. Nothing. Then, tap. The sound of fingers drumming lightly against the thin metal wall of the trailer. Tap, tap, tap. Moving along the length of it, circling. "Who the hell is out there?" Eddie shouted, his voice cracking. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in like a vice. And then, in the same whisper they had heard inside the cell, it came again, clear, close, as if someone were speaking directly into their ears. "You opened the door!" The lights inside the trailer exploded all at once, showering them with sparks. In the split-second darkness that followed, something heavy slammed against the side of the trailer hard enough to rattle the walls. The men stumbled back, panic breaking through their bravado. Mike clutched the journal tight against his chest, his face pale. And then came the final sound, the unmistakable creak of the trailer's back door slowly swinging open on its own. The silence after the door creaked open was worse than the noise. The men stood frozen inside the trailer, their bodies rigid, breaths held as though exhaling might call the thing inside. The night pressed heavy around them, the fog smothering even the pale light of the moon. Mike's knuckles whitened around the journal. Eddie gripped a wrench like a weapon, though he had no illusions it would matter against whatever had followed them. For a moment, nothing moved. The open door gaped black, a mouth yawning into emptiness. Then the cold came. A wave of air that didn't belong, colder than any night breeze, rolling in from the threshold. It carried a smell with it, something sour and damp, the scent of mildew and rot that clung to old basements and long-sealed tombs. "Close it," Eddie hissed. His voice cracked with terror. Close it now." But none of them moved. Their feet seemed anchored, their bodies paralyzed by the invisible weight of dread. It wasn't just fear. It was obedience, as though something in the fog commanded them to stay still, to listen. And then the whisper came again. "You shouldn't have read it." The journal in Mike's arms seemed to vibrate faintly, the pages shifting as though stirred by a breath that didn't come from him. His stomach twisted. A thought, terrible and undeniable, slid into his mind. The book isn't just a record, it's a cage. And I've broken the lock. At last, Eddie snapped free from the paralysis. He lunged forward, slammed the door shut, and braced his back against it, gasping. The others jolted as though released from invisible strings. But the damage was done. The air was different now, thick and alive with something unseen. That night, none of them dared leave the site. They clustered inside the trailer, jumping at every groan of the asylum's skeletal frame in the distance. Sleep was impossible. Some stared at the walls. Others kept their eyes fixed on the journal, daring it to move. By morning, 2 of the men were gone. No one had seen them leave. No sound had stirred them awake. Their bunks were simply empty, sheets cold, boots missing from the floor. The others searched the grounds in a panic, but the fog swallowed every footprint, and the asylum loomed like a silent witness. Eddie broke down, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "We're cursed. We need to burn this place to the ground, bury the ashes, something. I'm not sticking around to be next." Mike, however, was calm. Too calm. His eyes were bloodshot, sleepless, but steady. He ran a hand across the cracked leather journal as though soothing it. If we run, it'll follow. The patient said so. It needs someone to remember. If we leave without finishing this, we'll carry it with us forever. Eddie stared at him horrified. Listen to yourself. You're starting to sound like him. But Mike only shook his head. No, I'm starting to understand him. Later that day, they returned, reluctantly, to the East Wing. The wreckage of the torn cell remained, but something new had appeared. On the wall outside the room, written in a dark, wet scrawl that hadn't been there the day before, was a message. They erased my name. Give me yours. The men recoiled in terror, but Mike stepped closer. His breath fogged in front of him as though the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in that one hallway. He ran his fingers lightly over the letters. They weren't painted. They were gouged into the plaster, the grooves fresh and damp as though carved with something not quite human. That night, the journal grew heavier. Mike could feel it, literally feel the weight increasing in his hands. He opened it again, desperate for answers. The entries near the back were smeared, almost illegible, but fragments broke through. The thing cannot exist without a name. Without someone to hold it, it drifts, half-formed, in the dark. That is why they erased me. I am the wound they sealed shut. But wounds reopen. Doors reopen. All it takes is one curious hand, one fool to look inside the box. And now the box is open again. Beneath the scrawled text was something even worse. Not words, but drawings. Childlike, frantic sketches of faces, bodies bent at unnatural angles, mouths stretched too wide. And in every drawing, the patient's own face was scribbled out. No eyes, no mouth, no features. As Mike stared at the images, a thought slithered through his mind, unbidden, like it wasn't his own. He was never a patient. He was the lock, and we just broke it. The next evening, the asylum showed its teeth. The crew was working near the central stairwell when the lights flickered and went out completely, plunging the building into suffocating dark. Panic erupted as flashlights were fumbled on, beams slicing wildly through the black. One worker screamed, a raw, strangled sound, then cut off abruptly. When the others swung their lights toward the sound, they froze. The missing worker was there, but not as he had been. His body hung halfway through the wall, torso swallowed by brick, as though the asylum itself had eaten him. His legs kicked weakly, boots scraping against the floor, while his hands clawed at the plaster. His mouth opened in a silent scream, eyes bulging with impossible terror. Then the wall closed, just closed, swallowing him whole. The corridor was silent again. Eddie dropped his flashlight, his voice shaking. It's in the walls. Dear God, it's in the walls. Mike didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the journal clutched to his chest. His lips moved without sound, repeating something over and over. When Eddie leaned closer, he heard the whisper, "Still here now. Still here now. Still here now." And in that moment, Eddie realized with a gut-sickening certainty that Mike wasn't fighting it anymore. He was listening. By the fifth night, the asylum no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied. The men huddled in the trailer were a fraction of the crew that had first arrived. Out of 12, only 5 remained. The rest had vanished into the walls or walked into the fog and never returned. No screams carried, no evidence left behind. Just absence, the kind that gnawed at the stomach like hunger. Eddie hadn't slept in days. He sat by the door with a crowbar across his lap, jerking awake at every sound, every faint creak of the asylum shifting in the night. His eyes were rimmed red, his skin pale, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "It's playing with us," he whispered to no one in particular. "Like a cat. We're mice, and it's just waiting for us to give up." Across the room, Mike sat hunched over the journal again, the cracked leather cover glowing faintly in the dull lamplight. He turned the pages slowly, reverently, his lips moving in silent repetition of the patient's words. He was thinner now, hollow-eyed, like the asylum had begun feeding on him directly. Eddie couldn't stand it anymore. You've been glued to that damn book since the first day. Don't you see what it's doing to you? Hell, you're starting to sound like him. Mike lifted his head slowly. His pupils were wide, swallowing most of the iris, and when he spoke, his voice was steady in a way that made Eddie's blood run cold. He wasn't mad. They locked him away because he knew the truth. This place isn't haunted. It isn't cursed. It's hungry. And he was the one keeping it contained. Bullshit, Eddie snapped, standing. That thing in the walls isn't contained by anyone. It's eating us alive. Mike's mouth curved into a thin, humorless smile. Not alive, not dead either. It feeds on names, on memory. That's why they erased him. They thought if he didn't exist, neither would it. But someone always remembers. Someone always writes it down. And now it has me. The other men shifted uneasily, muttering under their breath, avoiding Mike's eyes. No one wanted to admit it, but he was right about one thing. The asylum felt more alive with every passing hour, as if feeding on their fear, their attention. The building groaned at night like it was breathing, the walls pulsing faintly in rhythm, doors swelling shut and releasing again like muscle and flesh. The following day, they tried to leave. Eddie demanded it, shoving the others toward the trucks, insisting they'd rather take their chances running through the fog than wait around to be swallowed whole. But the gates were gone. Where the chain-link fence had stood was nothing but mist stretching endlessly into gray. They drove in circles for hours, headlights cutting through the void, but every road bent back toward the asylum. Every mile carried them back to the same broken sign at the entrance. Ravenswood State Hospital for the Insane. By evening, Eddie sat on the ground with his face in his hands. "We're never getting out," he whispered. Mike didn't disagree. He only returned to the journal, tracing the words with his finger as though memorizing every curve of every letter. That night, the writing changed. When he opened to the latest page, it was blank at first. Then, before his eyes, ink began to spread across the surface, curling into words in the same frantic scrawl as before. "You've opened the door. You've read the words. You've given me form. Soon you will take my place." Mike felt his heart stutter, but he didn't close the book. Instead, a calm washed over him, the calm of inevitability. He looked up at the others, his voice low and distant. "It doesn't want all of us. Just one. One to hold its name again." Eddie leapt to his feet, horror etched across his face. "Don't you dare! Don't you fucking dare start talking about sacrifice!" But even as he said it, the walls groaned, plaster cracking, dust sifting down from the ceiling. A deep sound rumbled through the asylum, something between a growl and a sigh. The floor vibrated under their boots. The men scrambled, clutching tools, weapons, anything at hand. But the sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from beneath them. The floorboards of the trailer bulged upward, swelling as though something beneath was pressing against them. Nails shrieked as wood split. Eddie screamed, swinging his crowbar, but the boards burst open in a shower of splinters. From the darkness below, a hand reached up. Not a living hand, not bone and flesh. It was pale and stretched too long, the fingers jointed in odd places, bending both ways as though it had forgotten how to mimic the human form. Nails, no, claws, raked across the air. Another hand followed, then an arm, impossibly thin, skin hanging in folds. The men scrambled back as the thing pulled itself upward, its face emerging last. And though its features were smeared and wrong, they recognized it immediately. It was the missing worker, the one who had been swallowed by the wall. His mouth hung open too wide, jaw cracked, his eyes black pits. His voice was not his own when he spoke. "One of you must stay. One of you must wear the name, or none of you will leave." The thing lunged forward, scattering them into the night. The fog swallowed their screams. In the chaos, Eddie grabbed Mike's arm, shaking him violently. "We need to burn the book! It's the key! It's holding it here!" But Mike only clutched it tighter, a strange calm in his eyes. His whisper cut through the noise like a blade. "No, If we destroy it, there will be nothing to hold it at all. The storm outside raged like it had been waiting for this night, tearing at the decrepit asylum walls as though nature itself wanted the truth to come spilling out. The hallways groaned, wind howling through broken windows, carrying with it a whisper, low, guttural, and almost human. Mark, trembling, held the folder close to his chest, his flashlight shaking wildly as he tried to read through the last few pages of the patient file. His lips moved silently, repeating the same phrase over and over again. Admitted, 1943, never released, status, lost. Every page told a story of procedures done in secret, experiments hidden from the state, the kind of cruel practices asylum history books often glanced over but never fully confessed. But what made his stomach churn wasn't the torture. It was the handwriting. Every single entry, every single note was written by the same hand. Dr. Elias Harrow, head physician of Blackwood Asylum. And at the very bottom, one sentence written in a hurried scrawl, smeared in dark ink that looked too much like dried blood. Patient Zero is aware. The room seemed to press inward, the walls breathing, the shadows leaning closer as Mark realized what it meant. This wasn't just a patient. This wasn't a man at all. This was something Harrow had awakened, or perhaps created. And now, in the silence between lightning strikes, Mark heard it. A low, hollow breathing echoing through the cell corridor. He turned his flashlight toward the end of the hall. The beam barely reached, but he saw the faintest outline. Something tall, far taller than any man, standing perfectly still. Its body was thin, unnatural, its limbs just a fraction too long, its head cocked at an angle like it was studying him. And then, with a sickening crack of bone, it moved. Mark stumbled backward, his boot catching on a broken tile as his light flickered. He forced himself to focus on the file again, scanning the notes for something, anything that explained what he was dealing with. His eyes froze on one last detail. Patient records not archived. File hidden in duplicate form. Whoever finds this, do not acknowledge them. Do not speak. Do not look directly into their eyes. The words burned in his mind as his flashlight steadied. The figure was closer now. Its head tilted further, impossibly, grotesquely. Mark's breath quickened. He remembered the line, "Do not look into their eyes." But it was too late. The figure stepped forward, and the light revealed its face, or what was left of it. Hollow sockets where eyes should be, stretched skin across bones that had no right belonging to a human skull, and yet somehow, in the emptiness, Mark saw movement, saw awareness. The thing had no eyes, yet it was staring straight into him, burrowing into the deepest part of his mind. Mark screamed, stumbling back, clutching his head as the whispers poured into him. He wasn't hearing them with his ears, he was hearing them inside his skull. Fragments of voices layered over each other, patients begging, crying, screaming. 1,000 lost souls, all speaking through this one mouthless horror. "You opened the cell!" The voice was inside him, deep and thunderous, yet eerily calm. "You let me out!" Mark dropped the folder, pages scattered across the floor like dead leaves in a storm. He turned and ran, his footsteps echoing like gunshots down the endless corridor. He didn't dare look back, but he could hear it. Those dragging footsteps, impossibly fast, impossibly close. The storm outside tore open part of the ceiling as Mark burst into the main atrium, rain pouring in through the broken roof. The whole building felt like it was collapsing, timbers groaning under the weight of decades. And in the center of the room stood something he hadn't noticed before. A huge iron door, welded shut, chains wrapped tightly around it. Lightning illuminated the writing carved deep into the metal. "Do not open. Patient Zero." Mark froze, his chest heaving, realization hitting him like ice water. The cell he opened earlier wasn't the true cell. It was only a holding chamber. The real prison was here, locked and buried beneath chains and steel. But then, if Patient Zero was supposed to be behind that door, slowly, painfully, his head turned. The figure was standing right behind him. Its breath was cold against his neck, its hollow sockets pouring an endless blackness into the air, consuming the light around it. And for the first time, Mark understood the final, horrific truth. Patient Zero was not a single man or a failed experiment. Patient Zero was the asylum itself. Every tortured scream, every lost patient, every experiment had fed into this one entity, growing, watching, waiting. The asylum was never abandoned. It was never empty. It had been alive all along, and Mark had just given it a voice again. The lights died, the storm stopped, and silence fell across Blackwood Asylum. When the demolition crew returned 2 days later, they found the building standing completely intact, untouched by the storm. But there was no sign of Mark. Only his flashlight lying in the atrium, its beam pointing toward the chained iron door. Chains that were no longer broken, but reforged tighter than ever, as though welded from the inside, and carved freshly into the floor as if written by a hand trembling in its final moments, were words no one could explain. The patient has been transferred. Check the new records. What if I told you there's a house in America where no one has ever survived a single night? That was the line that hooked over 20,000 people into watching a late-night live stream on October 12th. The screen flickered with static, before focusing on 4 grinning faces lit by the sickly glow of their phone flashlights. They called themselves the Fear Chasers, a group of urban explorers who thrived on breaking into abandoned hospitals, forgotten factories, and condemned houses. But tonight was different. Tonight they had chosen a place that locals only whispered about, the Mercer House. According to legend, everyone who had entered Mercer House after sundown had disappeared. Police investigations always ended with the same conclusion: structurally unsafe, not suitable for entry. But people talked. They said the house was cursed, that its walls moved when no one was watching, that the doors closed themselves, and that the last man to spend the night inside had been found outside the next morning with his bones crushed flat, as if the house had swallowed him and spat him back out. None of that mattered to the Fear Chasers. In fact, it made the challenge irresistible. The stream began with Blake, the leader, holding up his phone to the cracked iron gates. Behind him loomed the mansion, a towering Victorian husk with broken shutters that looked like eyelids half closed in sleep. The house gave off a strange hum, like wood straining against itself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blake announced dramatically, "welcome to the one and only Mercer House. No one has ever survived a single night here, but tonight we're breaking the curse, Lev." The chat exploded with laughing emojis, dare messages, and a few chilling warnings from locals who typed, "Turn back. Don't go in." Beside Blake stood Marissa, the skeptic of the group. Her arms crossed tightly, though her forced smile told the audience she didn't want to be there. Next was Jonah, the tech guy, already adjusting his GoPro and checking his drone feed. And lastly, there was Casey, the quiet one, always tagging along, always recording. He didn't say much, but his camera never blinked. The gates creaked open with a sound like a scream muffled in the throat. They stepped through, the gravel crunching like brittle bones beneath their shoes. The house loomed closer, its windows dark and glossy like watching eyes. Inside, the air smelled of mold and something else. Something metallic, like rusted iron or dried blood. Their light swept across the entrance hall. Wallpaper peeled in strips, exposing long veins of cracked wood beneath. The grand staircase rose before them, each step sagging like tired lungs. "This place is a wreck," Jonah muttered, though his voice trembled. Blake smirked at the camera. "Remember, folks, if we make it until sunrise, Mercer House's curse is broken. Let's get exploring." They wandered room to room, narrating for the audience. A dining room where chairs faced the walls as if in punishment, a nursery littered with broken dolls whose glass eyes glittered in the flashlight beams, a library where every book had its pages torn out. But the deeper they went, the stranger it became. Marissa noticed first. "Wait," she whispered, stopping in the hallway. "Didn't we pass this painting already?" Everyone turned. The portrait, a gaunt woman with hollow eyes, hung on the wall. Just minutes before, they had seen the exact same painting in the library. Maybe there's more than one, Blake shrugged, but his laugh was thin. They pressed on, yet no matter where they went, the house seemed to rearrange itself. Doors opened into rooms they had already seen. Hallways twisted back on themselves. A closet door, when opened, revealed not coats, but another hallway, lined with that same portrait. "Guys," Jonah said, his voice low. "I'm mapping the floor plan on my tablet and it doesn't make sense. The rooms overlap each other. It's impossible." The chat began to shift. Messages flooded in. "Get out now. It's moving. Something's wrong with the mirrors." "Mirrors?" Casey asked quietly, pointing his camera to the cracked wall-length mirror in the hallway. Their reflections stared back, except Marissa wasn't moving. Her reflection stayed perfectly still, even as she turned her head in horror to look. The audience exploded in all caps. "Her reflection didn't move!" Marissa stumbled back, bumping into Blake. Her reflection remained, frozen, her eyes wide and mouth open as if mid-scream. Then, without warning, the reflection's mouth began to move. Slowly, soundlessly, forming words none of them could hear. "Jesus Christ," Blake muttered, grabbing Marissa's arm. "We're done. We're leaving now." But when they turned back toward the entrance, the front door was gone. There was only another hallway. A hallway lined with mirrors, and in every reflection, their doubles smiled. The silence after that moment was unbearable. Even the live stream chat slowed to a crawl, as if the viewers themselves were holding their breath. Blake aimed his phone back at the hallway where the front door should have been, his camera shaking despite his best effort to appear in control. There was a door," Marissa whispered, her voice raw. "I swear to God, we came through right there." But the polished wooden hallway stretched endlessly, lined with warped mirrors that caught their flashlight beams and threw them back in distorted shapes. Their reflections no longer matched their movements. Each reflection lagged, smiled too wide, or turned its head a second too late. "Okay," Blake said, his voice cracking as he tried to sound steady for the audience. This is a prank. Somebody's messing with us." "No one's messing with us," Jonah said. His eyes darted around, scanning the mirrors, scanning the floor plan on his tablet. "This place is changing. Literally changing. It's not even architecture anymore. It's like it's alive." Casey, still recording, whispered so softly the mic barely picked it up. "Then it's watching us." The chat came alive again. "Run. Don't look in the mirrors. Cover them. Cover them." Marissa suddenly let out a short cry. One of the reflections, her own, had pressed its palms flat against the glass and was mouthing words at her. This time, the words were clear. "Stay." She stumbled back, nearly tripping over a broken chair behind her. "We have to find another way out," she said. "Now." They followed Jonah deeper into the house, their flashlights jittering across the rotting wallpaper. Every hallway seemed to stretch farther than it should, and every door led to somewhere wrong: a kitchen where the ceiling dripped black water, a bedroom where the bed pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the sheets, a stairwell that twisted upward into darkness but ended against a solid wall after only 7 steps. Blake kept the stream going, trying to keep his voice calm for the viewers. "Okay, guys, just remember, we're professionals. We've done asylums, tunnels, even that sewer system in Philly. This is no different." But his bravado cracked when Jonah stopped in the middle of a hallway and turned his tablet for them to see. "The map is erasing itself," he whispered. On the screen, the rooms Jonah had carefully mapped earlier were disappearing one by one, dissolving into static as if they'd never existed. Casey lowered his camera for the first time. "It's eating the house," he said. A sudden crash echoed from behind them. They spun around. One of the mirrors had shattered on its own, pieces scattered across the warped floor. But the reflection, their reflections, remained in the broken glass. And they were moving closer. The shards rippled as though filled with liquid, their doubles crawling forward, dragging themselves through the glass with sickening, jerky movements. Their grins were carved too wide, eyes too black. "Oh God, run!" Marissa screamed. They sprinted down the hall, their footsteps pounding against the floorboards, the sound overlapping with the distorted laughter of the reflections. Blake's camera shook violently as he tried to keep the audience in view. The chat exploded in warnings, pleas, and disbelief. Finally, they burst into a large room that looked like a ballroom. The floor was coated in dust, but their footsteps left no tracks. The chandeliers above were swaying, though no wind stirred. "What the hell?" Blake panted. Jonah doubled over, his breath ragged. "The house! It's not just rearranging, it's deciding where we go. It's trapping us." Marissa pointed to the far side of the ballroom. "Look! Stairs!" Sure enough, a grand staircase curved upward into the shadows. Without thinking, they bolted across the room. But halfway up, Casey froze, his camera tilted toward the chandelier above. "Wait," he whispered. The others stopped, following his gaze. Every chandelier, every one of the dozen glittering lights above, was filled with bones. Human bones, strung together like ornaments, jawbones clattering softly against ribs with each swing. The lights flickered once, twice, then every bulb went out. Darkness swallowed them whole, and in that suffocating black, something began to breathe. The sound was unmistakable. A slow, heavy inhale. Then an exhale so deep it seemed to stir the dust around their feet. "Tell me that's not," Jonah began, but his voice broke. "No one breathe," Blake whispered. His phone flashlight cut a thin, trembling beam through the dark. The chat was going insane. "It's breathing with you. Get out. It's inside the house walls." But the sound wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from everywhere. The floor beneath their shoes seemed to pulse with each inhale. The banister vibrated with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The house was alive and awake. Marissa clutched Blake's arm. "It doesn't want us to leave." As if responding, every chandelier snapped back to life at once. Harsh white light flooded the ballroom, revealing the bone-filled fixtures swaying violently now, as though shaken by invisible hands. The explorers staggered backward, shielding their eyes. Casey's camera caught it first. "There," he said hoarsely, pointing. One of the mirrors they had left behind was now leaning against the far wall of the ballroom. None of them remembered carrying it in. But it was there, huge, cracked down the middle. And in its surface, their reflections were still running, still frozen in mid-flight, as if trapped in the hallway they'd just escaped. "Okay," Blake said, forcing calm. We just keep moving. Stairs. Now." They climbed quickly, the wood groaning under their weight. At the top of the staircase, the landing stretched into a corridor lined with closed doors. The wallpaper peeled in curling strips that revealed what looked less like plaster and more like skin. Jonah wiped sweat from his forehead. "I don't think we're supposed to choose," he said. But Blake shoved the nearest door open. Inside was a bedroom, except the bed was not a bed at all. The mattress rose and fell like lungs, fabric stretching as though something massive lived beneath it. With each rise, a muffled scream echoed from inside the padding. They slammed the door shut. The next room was worse. It looked like a nursery at first, until the dolls turned their heads in unison toward the explorers. Their glassy eyes were black pits, their mouths sewn shut with wire. The sound of tiny fingernails scratching wood filled the air, though the dolls hadn't moved. Marissa pressed her hand to her mouth to stop a scream. "It's showing us things. It's feeding on us." Casey lowered his camera for a moment, staring straight at her. "Not showing," he said. "Teaching." Before anyone could question him, a door at the end of the corridor creaked open on its own. Beyond it was not another room, but a staircase spiraling downward into blackness. Jonah shook his head. No way. We go back." "Back where?" Blake snapped. He pointed down the hall. The nursery door was now gone, replaced with smooth wall. The other bedroom door vanished too. Only the staircase remained. The live stream chat screamed with capital letters, "Don't go down there! It wants you to! Run!" But with no other option, they descended. The air grew colder with each step, until their breath came out in fog. The stairs ended in a vast cellar. Unlike the decayed house above, this place was pristine. The walls were smooth, black stone, wet to the touch, as if carved from something not meant to be touched. And in the center of the cellar stood a single chair, a rocking chair. It swayed slowly, back and forth, though no one sat in it. Casey raised his camera. His voice trembled, but there was something strange in it, almost awe. "It's waiting." Blake grabbed his shoulder. Waiting for what? Casey turned his head. His eyes caught the flashlight beam, gleaming too bright, too wet. "For one of us to sit." The rocking chair creaked louder, as though in agreement. And then, as if pulled by invisible hands, Marissa took one step forward. "Marissa, stop!" Blake shouted, grabbing her arm before she could step closer to the rocking chair. Her face was pale, eyes glassy, as though she hadn't heard him. The chair rocked back and forth on its own, creaking in a rhythm that matched the slow inhale and exhale of the house itself. "Marissa, look at me." Blake shook her. She blinked rapidly, as if waking from a trance, and stumbled back into Jonah. I didn't mean to," she whispered. "Something pulled me." Casey's camera never wavered. He zoomed in on the chair, whispering almost reverently, "It's not pulling, it's calling." Jonah rounded on him. "What the hell is wrong with you? Put the camera down for once." But Casey didn't. His hands trembled, but he never stopped filming. His eyes glistened with something between fear and fascination. The chat was exploding. "She was going to sit. Don't let anyone sit in it." Casey's acting weird. Blake dragged everyone toward the far side of the cellar, away from the chair. But as they moved, the black stone walls began to change. Faces appeared in the slick surface. Faces screaming in silent agony, mouths open too wide, eyes sunken but alive. The explorers froze, lights shaking across the grotesque wall of humanity. "Oh my God," Marissa breathed. "They're people. The people who didn't survive the night." Jonah's voice cracked. No, this isn't real. It can't be real." But then one of the faces pressed forward, straining against the stone, its lips moving. They could all hear it clearly. "Sit down." The rocking chair creaked louder, the sound echoing in their skulls. Panic surged through the group. Blake grabbed Jonah and Marissa. "We're leaving. Now!" But the stairs were gone. Behind them, where the staircase had been, was nothing but smooth, unbroken stone. "No, no, no, no!" Jonah shouted, pounding against the wall. "It was here! It was just here!" The rocking chair slowed, its movement halting. The cellar fell eerily silent. Then a new sound rose, a wet, dragging shuffle, like something crawling just beyond the light. Blake swung his phone around, its flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Something was there. In the far corner of the cellar, a shape clung to the ceiling. Its limbs were too long, bent at impossible angles, fingers like sharpened wood splintering from its hands. Its head jerked toward them, snapping in sharp motions as though its neck were broken. The chat went insane. "What is that? Run, run, run! Don't look at it!" Marissa screamed as the creature dropped to the floor with a sound like snapping branches. It didn't move toward them at first. It crawled to the rocking chair, curling its long limbs around it like a child hugging a toy. Slowly, it began to rock. Back and forth. Back and forth. Casey whispered into his camera, "It's feeding." Blake grabbed him, shaking hard. "Shut up! What the hell do you mean by that?" Casey's voice broke into a trembling laugh. "Don't you see? That's why no one survives the night. The house isn't haunted, it's hungry. And every step we take, every scream, every ounce of fear, we're feeding it." The creature's head snapped toward them. Its mouth opened wider than humanly possible, releasing a low, guttural moan that vibrated through the stone walls. The faces in the walls screamed in unison, their cries muffled but deafening. The explorers clamped their hands over their ears, but the sound burrowed inside, rattling their skulls. The lights flickered violently, plunging them into brief flashes of total darkness. When the light steadied again, Marissa was gone. "Marissa!" Blake screamed, spinning in circles. "Marissa!" Then they heard it, from the chair. The sound of the chair rocking, slow and steady again. And Marissa's voice, soft, broken, whispering from its seat. "Don't fight it." "Marissa!" Blake's shout cracked through the cellar, echoing off the black stone. He shoved his phone's light toward the rocking chair. Marissa was there. Her body sat stiffly in the chair, hands folded neatly in her lap like a child posing for a portrait. But her eyes were wide and blank, staring straight ahead, unblinking. Her lips moved slowly, whispering words none of them could hear. "No," Jonah muttered, shaking his head violently. "No, no, no, that's not her. That can't be her." The creature crouched behind the chair, its elongated limbs wrapped lovingly around the backrest, rocking her gently. Its mouth hung open in a jagged smile, black drool hissing as it dripped onto the stone floor. Casey raised his camera, zooming in. His voice trembled, but there was a strange fascination in it. It let her sit. That means she's part of it now. Blake spun on him, furious. "Shut up! She's not part of anything. We're getting her out." He ran forward, grabbing Marissa's arm to yank her from the chair. For a second it worked. Her body jerked forward as though breaking free. But then her skin rippled beneath his grip, sinking, stretching like wax too close to fire. And before his eyes, her arm melted back into the chair. "God! Jesus Christ!" Blake stumbled back, his hands slick with something warm. It wasn't blood, it was thicker, oily. The chair pulsed once like a living organ, and Marissa's blank eyes rolled toward him. This time, her lips formed clear words. "You can't leave." Jonah screamed, grabbing Blake and pulling him away as the creature began to rise from its crouch, bones cracking with each jerky motion. It unfolded itself like an insect, stretching its legs, towering taller than any of them. Its body scraped the ceiling. The chat exploded in panic. "Run! Marissa's gone! Don't touch the chair!" Casey, still recording, didn't move. His camera stayed locked on Marissa and the creature, his face a mix of horror and awe. Blake shoved him hard. "Move, damn it!" The three remaining explorers sprinted along the edges of the cellar, searching desperately for an exit. The smooth black stone walls offered nothing. No stairs, no cracks, nothing but screaming faces pressed just below the surface. Then Jonah saw it. "There! Look!" In the far corner, a doorway flickered into existence. Not built into the stone. It simply appeared, trembling like a hole torn in reality. Beyond it was a hallway, lined with candlelight. "Go!" Blake shouted. They ran for it, the sound of the creature's limbs scraping against the floor behind them. Just as they reached the doorway, Casey stopped. "Wait," he said. Blake and Jonah skidded to a halt, whirling on him. "What the hell are you doing?" Blake screamed. Casey's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. His camera shook in his hands, but he never lowered it. "It wants one of us," he said softly. "That's the deal. That's how the others survived this long in here. That's why the house keeps feeding. It only lets the rest go when one of us stays." Jonah's face twisted with disbelief. "You've lost your mind." Casey shook his head slowly. "No, I've been listening, watching. The chat heard it too. It doesn't just eat us, it collects us. One sits, the others leave. That's the bargain." Behind them, the creature screeched, a sound like metal tearing against bone. The rocking chair thudded hard against the floor, shaking as though eager for another occupant. Casey took one step backward, toward it. His camera remained trained on Blake and Jonah, broadcasting his trembling smile to thousands of horrified viewers. "You guys should go," he whispered. "Someone has to." Jonah lunged for him. "No, Don't you dare! But the floor groaned beneath their feet, splitting into jagged cracks. The house was choosing, and the chair kept rocking. "Casey, stop! Don't do this!" Blake shouted, his voice breaking. He and Jonah clung to the edges of the cracking floor, the stone splitting into jagged chasms that glowed faintly red below, as if something vast and burning lay beneath the house. But Casey didn't stop. His face was eerily calm, even tender, as he backed toward the rocking chair. The creature loomed behind it, limbs twitching in spasms of anticipation. "This isn't about us anymore," Casey said. His voice trembled, but his conviction was chilling. "Don't you get it? It's been feeding for decades, maybe centuries. We can't fight it, but we can bargain." Jonah lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "You're insane. This isn't bargaining, it's suicide." Casey jerked free with surprising strength. "Better one of us than all of us." Blake's chest heaved, his mind racing. Behind him, the doorway of flickering candlelight pulsed like a heartbeat, as if the house was holding the exit open just long enough to tempt them. "Casey, listen to me," Blake said, forcing his voice to steady. "This house doesn't let anyone go. You sit in that chair, you're gone, and we'll be next. Don't you see? It never stops." For a moment, doubt flickered across Casey's face. His hands shook, lowering the camera. But then the chair rocked on its own, slowly, creaking in rhythm with the house's breath. The faces in the stone walls screamed in unison, "Sit!" Casey's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." He turned toward the chair. "No!" Jonah surged forward, shoving him hard. The two crashed to the floor, wrestling as the cracks widened beneath them. The livestream viewers watched in horror, comments exploding in a blur of panic. The creature shrieked, the sound like glass shattering inside their skulls. It began to crawl toward them, each movement grotesque and jerking. Its limbs stretched impossibly long, spanning half the cellar in seconds. "Go!" Jonah shouted at Blake, his voice raw. He wrestled Casey, pinning him down, trying to keep him away from the chair. "Get out while you can!" Blake hesitated, torn, every nerve in his body screaming at him to run and to stay all at once. Then, in a horrifying blur, the floor beneath Jonah split wide. He and Casey tumbled into the crack, their screams echoing as they vanished into the fiery glow below. The stone sealed behind them as though it had never opened. The chair stopped rocking. Blake stood frozen, chest heaving, staring at the empty space where his friends had been. Only the creature remained. Slowly, it turned its head toward him, its mouth split wide into a jagged grin. And then, the rocking chair creaked once more. Blake's phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down in shock. The livestream chat had gone silent, completely silent, except for a single new message that repeated again and again. "Sit. What if the house never wanted ghosts? What if it wanted us alive?" The words hung in the air like poison. Ethan's voice cracked as he whispered them, his flashlight trembling in his grip. A silence followed, heavy and suffocating, as though the house itself was listening. "Alive?" Rachel asked, her face pale. "You mean, it doesn't kill them?" Ethan shook his head. His eyes darted to the walls, to the ceiling, to the pulsating beams of wood and wallpaper that seemed to throb faintly, like the steady beat of a hidden heart. "Not right away. It feeds on them slowly, keeps them inside. That's why no one survives. They don't die. They stay." The lights flickered violently, and suddenly, the distorted faces they had glimpsed earlier appeared again on the walls. This time, they weren't illusions. They pressed forward, stretching the wallpaper like wet clay, mouths opening in silent screams. Some faces were twisted in agony, others frozen in despair. Their eyes, milky white, rolled toward the group as if begging for release. Rachel stumbled back, clutching Jason's arm. "Oh my God, those are people. Actual people. And they're still alive," Ethan said grimly. His voice was low, almost reverent. The house keeps them breathing, but not living. It feeds off their fear, their suffering. That's why it rearranges. It traps them, moves them, keeps them from escaping. Jason's skin crawled as he pressed himself against the wall. He could feel the faint vibrations of breathing beneath the plaster, as if lungs were expanding and contracting inches from his fingertips. He yanked his hand away, gagging. Suddenly, a distorted voice reverberated through the hall. It wasn't quite human. It was layered, overlapping, like hundreds of whispers speaking the same words at once. Stay, with us, stay, forever. The faces in the wall began pushing outwards, stretching further into the hallway, their fingers and hands forming beneath the peeling wallpaper. One hand ripped free with a wet tearing sound, grasping for Rachel's ankle. She screamed, kicking it away, but the skinless fingers only retracted, vanishing back into the wall. "They're trying to pull us in," Jason said, his breathing ragged. "We're next." Ethan spun around, his flashlight beam jittering. No, there has to be a way out. There's always..." But then he froze. His light caught something painted across the far wall. At first it looked like blood, smeared and dripping. But as they approached, they realized it wasn't fresh. It was old, darkened with time. Words had been scratched deep into the wood beneath the wallpaper, as though carved in desperation. "Do not sleep." The message repeated itself across the wall, scrawled by dozens of hands, over and over again. Rachel's voice trembled. "Do not sleep. What does that mean?" Before Ethan could answer, the hallway stretched again, violently. The floor buckled, and the group fell hard, sliding as the boards tilted downward like a chute. They tumbled into darkness, crashing into what felt like stone. Jason's flashlight cracked but stayed lit, revealing where they had landed. A basement. But it wasn't like any basement they had ever seen. The walls weren't stone or brick, they were flesh. The floor was slick, veined, pulsing with a low, steady rhythm. Massive tendrils, like roots, crawled along the ceiling, dripping with a thick black ooze. At the center of the room was a pulsating mound, something huge and alive, throbbing with every heartbeat of the house. The air was hot and damp, and it breathed. Rachel covered her mouth, choking. "Oh God, it's alive. The house is alive." Ethan nodded, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror but also fascination. "It's not a house. It never was. It's a body, a living organism, and we're inside it." Jason staggered backward, bile rising in his throat. No, this can't be real." The mound in the center shifted suddenly. A slit opened across its surface, revealing a wet, glistening eye that rolled toward them. The pupils were dilated, hungry, ancient. The whispers began again, louder this time, coming from everywhere at once. "Do not sleep. Do not sleep. Or you will stay forever." Rachel grabbed Ethan's arm. "What does it mean? Why can't we sleep?" Ethan's face drained of color. "Because that's how it gets you. If you fall asleep, the house pulls you in. That's when it feeds." Jason's eyes widened in horror as the tendrils above began writhing, slowly lowering toward them. "Then we can't stop moving," Jason whispered. "We can't stop, or we'll never leave." The eye blinked. The floor beneath them began to ripple. And then, one of the tendrils lashed down, wrapping tightly around Rachel's wrist. She screamed as it began dragging her toward the pulsating mound. "Help me!" she shrieked. Jason and Ethan lunged forward, grabbing her arms, pulling with everything they had. But the tendril was impossibly strong, tightening, pulling her closer, inch by inch, toward the living heart of the house. The eye widened, focusing on her. And then, the whispering stopped. A silence fell, heavy and absolute. Rachel's voice broke. "Please, don't let it take me." The eye blinked once more, and the basement floor opened beneath them. The house had grown. That much was certain. What once had been a creaking Victorian structure in the middle of nowhere had now expanded into a labyrinth of impossible halls and staircases that bent sideways, twisting into Escher-like illusions. The group, what was left of them, was trapped deep inside its guts. Ethan led the way with the flickering camera light, his face pale with terror, but stubbornly determined. Madison clung to his arm, her breath quick and shallow. Behind them, only two others remained: Jess, trembling but holding a broken flashlight like a weapon, and Ryan, blood dripping from a long cut down his leg. Every hallway felt alive, breathing. They could hear it. The faint sound of lungs exhaling, walls expanding and contracting, wood moaning like muscle under strain. It's not a house," Jess whispered finally, her voice breaking. "We're inside something alive." No one argued. They reached a massive chamber that hadn't been there before. The ceiling soared into darkness, lined with what looked like wooden beams, but when Ethan angled the camera upward, the beams twitched. Tendons. Thick, ropey strands pulsing with blood. At the center of the room stood something grotesque. A door. Not wooden, but fleshy, its frame beating faintly like a heart. It dripped with dark, tarry ichor, and every few seconds it pulsed outward, as though inviting them in. Ryan gagged and staggered back. "Nope, nope, I'm done. That's not a door. That's a goddamn mouth." Ethan steadied him. "We've got no choice. Look around. Do you see any other way out?" The group glanced behind them. The hallway they had come through was gone, sealed up by slick, fleshy walls that had grown over it like scar tissue. The house had closed the wound. "We either go forward," Ethan said grimly, "or we die here." They approached the pulsing door. The air around it was heavy, thick, smelling of rot and iron. Madison pressed her hands against her ears, muttering prayers under her breath, but the prayers seemed swallowed by the house. Suddenly, the door shuddered and split open down the middle, unveiling a passage lined with meat-like walls, veins glowing faintly red as if carrying molten blood. A warm gust of air washed over them, smelling disturbingly like breath. "No. No way," Jess whispered. "That's its throat." And it was. The realization struck all of them at once. The house wasn't just feeding on them. It was digesting them, slowly pulling them deeper inside its body until there would be nothing left. Ethan forced himself to step in first. His sneakers squelched on the wet organic floor, and the sound was unbearable, like walking through raw flesh. Madison clutched his jacket, eyes wide with tears. Jess and Ryan followed, though every step seemed to drain their will. As they descended through the passage, the walls contracted around them, squeezing tighter and tighter. Pulses of heat ran through the structure, like blood being pumped by an unseen heart. And then, they heard it. A voice. Not a whisper. Not a scream, but a low, guttural sound reverberating through the walls. It wasn't words at first, just a vibration that shook their bones. But slowly, horribly, syllables formed. "Hungry!" Jess let out a strangled sob. "It's talking. Oh my God, it knows we're here!" Ethan tightened his grip on the camera. The light flickered again, but he held it steady. "Keep moving. We have to find the core. If it's alive, then it can die." They stumbled into another chamber, larger, hotter, stinking of bile. The floor wasn't wood or stone anymore. It was soft, pliant, twitching with each step, and covered in strange lumps. At first, Madison thought the lumps were rocks, but then one shifted and moaned. Bodies, dozens of them, half digested, fused into the walls and floor. Explorers, families, wanderers, all of them caught by the house, their skin stretched and melted into its surface. Their eyes flickered open, milky white, mouths opening and closing as if trying to scream, but too weak to make a sound. Jess screamed and stumbled backward. "No, no, no, no." Ryan fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. We're next. It's going to eat us alive." The half-digested victims began to move in unison, their broken voices rasping the same word over and over. Join, join, join. Ethan dragged Madison and Jess forward. Don't look at them. Don't listen. There has to be a way out. But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Because as he turned, the camera caught something in the far wall of the chamber. A massive, pulsating organ. Red, wet, and throbbing, veins crawling across it like black roots. The heart of the house. It beat slowly, powerfully, each thud rattling their bones. With every pulse, the walls around them tightened. The victims embedded in the floor twitched harder, whispering louder. Ethan swallowed hard. That's it. That's where it lives. Madison clutched his arm. Then how do we kill a house? Ethan didn't answer. He was staring down at the camera, at the metal battery pack clipped to the side, sparking faintly from the endless abuse it had taken. A terrible, desperate idea was forming in his mind, and the house seemed to sense it. Because suddenly, the entire chamber let out a guttural, deafening roar. What if your radio picked up a signal that didn't come from Earth? That was the thought that haunted Jack Kearney on the night he stumbled across the frequency. He was driving through the Mojave Desert just after midnight, his old Chevy pickup rattling over the cracked two-lane highway. The desert stretched endlessly in both directions. No lights, no towns, only the whisper of the wind against the sand dunes. Jack had been on the road for 12 hours straight, hauling tools back from a contracting job in Nevada when the static started. Not normal static. It was the kind that made your hair rise, a low hiss that seemed to crawl under your skin, punctuated by faint whispers, like someone trying to speak from the other side of a wall. He fiddled with the dial, searching for something clear, anything to break the monotony of the drive. That's when the voice came. Good evening. Here are tonight's headlines for August 15th, 2025. Jack froze. His hands gripped the wheel tighter. The green glow of the dashboard clock read, August 14th, 11:57 p.m. The voice was calm, steady, professional, like a news anchor, but carried a faint distortion, as if recorded underwater. A deadly pileup on Interstate 40 will leave 6 dead and 14 injured. The cause is still under investigation. Jack's eyes widened. Interstate 40 was only 100 miles south of where he was driving, but there hadn't been anything on the regular news about an accident. He shook his head, told himself it was some pirate station playing a prank, maybe a rerun of an old broadcast. But the next headline made his stomach drop. In Las Vegas, the Bellagio Hotel will be evacuated tomorrow morning after a fire breaks out on the 12th floor. Authorities confirm the blaze begins in a faulty electrical panel near the east stairwell. Jack muttered, "The hell is this?" His voice sounded too loud in the cab. The radio continued. And finally, local to the Mojave Desert, a contractor named Jack Kearney will stop for gas at an abandoned station near mile marker 147. He will not make it home. The steering wheel almost slipped out of his hands. Jesus Christ. The voice had said his name, his full name. He slammed the dial off, the radio cutting back to silence. Only the low hum of the engine filled the air. For a long moment, Jack considered pulling over and just sitting there in the dark, but the thought of stopping on this empty stretch of road made his skin crawl even more. He shook his head, laughed nervously, and muttered, "Too much coffee, Jack. You're hearing things." But the words didn't convince him. His pulse still thundered in his neck. The road stretched endlessly ahead, black asphalt cutting through an ocean of sand. After 20 minutes of silence, he tried the radio again, this time scanning carefully through stations. Country, pop, talk radio, static. Nothing unusual. When the faint hum of static returned, he almost skipped past it, but then he caught the voice again. Update. Interstate 40 accident confirmed. 6 dead, 14 injured. Among the casualties, a family of 4. Names withheld pending notification of kin. Jack's breath hitched. That accident hadn't even happened yet, or had it. He grabbed his phone and checked the news. No reports, No breaking updates, just normal late-night chatter. The voice continued, steady as ever. The Bellagio fire in Las Vegas remains under investigation. Evacuation successful. No fatalities reported. More on this story at dawn. Jack's throat went dry. Dawn hadn't come yet. And then... Approaching mile marker 147. Signal clear. Subject arrival imminent. The radio cut to static. Jack's headlights illuminated a battered green road sign up ahead. His eyes darted to the number. Mile marker 147. His pulse pounded in his ears as the truck rattled past the sign. Up ahead, maybe 100 yards away, he saw the faint glow of a gas station. Or at least, something that used to be one. The rusted metal canopy leaned at an angle, the pumps coated in sand and dust, windows boarded. The place looked dead. But a single light glowed from inside the station's office, flickering faintly, as though someone had left a bulb burning for decades. Jack swallowed. He hadn't planned to stop. He had enough gas to make it through the desert, but his foot lifted from the accelerator anyway. Something about the voice on the radio, something about it knowing his name. He slowed the truck, gravel crunching under the tires as he pulled into the lot. The moment he shifted into park, the radio switched itself back on. Jack hadn't touched it. The voice whispered, almost like it was right beside him now. "Welcome, Jack. We've been waiting." Jack's breath caught in his throat. His hand froze on the ignition. And then the flickering light inside the station turned off. The desert swallowed the sound as Jack sat frozen in the cab of his truck. The single light inside the station had gone dark, leaving nothing but the pale silver glow of the moon over broken glass and rusted pumps. The voice on the radio still echoed in his mind. "Welcome, Jack. We've been waiting." Every part of him screamed to slam the truck in reverse, peel back onto the road, and drive until the desert was nothing but a memory in the rearview mirror. But his hands stayed glued to the steering wheel. "They know my name." He forced himself to look at the building. The windows were covered in dusty boards, nailed unevenly like someone had tried to keep something inside rather than out. The paint on the walls had peeled to a sickly yellow. But then, his stomach lurched. He saw it. One of the boards was slightly loose, just enough for something to peek through. Two faint pinpricks of light stared back at him. Jack's skin crawled. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and when he looked again, the pinpricks were gone. He reached for the ignition, turned the key. The engine coughed, once, twice, and then died. "Come on," Jack hissed, twisting the key again. Nothing. The battery light flickered red on the dash. The radio flared back to life, though the dial was still switched off. "Subject arrival confirmed. Initiating contact." Jack slammed his fist against the dashboard. "What the hell do you want from me?" No answer. Only static. Then, faintly, beneath the hiss, he heard his own voice. "What the hell do you want from me?" Jack's blood ran cold. It was repeating him, word for word, just seconds delayed, like an echo from the future. His breathing came fast and shallow. If the truck wasn't going anywhere, then he had two choices: sit there and wait for whatever this was, or check the station. Against every ounce of reason in him, his hand found the door handle. The desert night hit him like a wall of ice as he stepped out. The silence was suffocating, heavy enough that the crunch of his boots on gravel sounded like gunshots. The station loomed closer, the boards creaking faintly in the wind. Jack's flashlight cut through the darkness as he approached, the beam shaking in his trembling hand. The front door was chained shut with a rusted padlock. He pressed his light against the glass. Dust, overturned chairs, papers scattered across the floor. But in the far corner, something moved. A shape, crouched low, shifting in the dark. Jack stumbled back, heart pounding. The movement stopped. Then the radio from his truck blared again, so loud he swore the speakers would blow. "Don't run. We're almost ready." The crouched figure in the corner slowly lifted its head toward the window. Jack's flashlight flickered once, twice, and when it steadied, the shape was gone. His legs felt like they could give out at any second. He spun around ready to bolt back to the truck when a sound stopped him. Click. The chains on the door rattled, one loop falling loose. Click. The padlock dropped into the dust. The door creaked open an inch, then another, wide enough to invite him in. "Hell no," Jack muttered, backing away. But then a voice whispered behind him, low and breathy, almost brushing his ear. "Jack." He spun, swinging the flashlight. Nothing, just sand and darkness. When he turned back to the door, it was fully open now. Jack's throat felt tight. His gut screamed at him to run, but his curiosity gnawed at him with equal force. Whoever was behind this, whatever this was, it knew his name. It knew where he'd be. And if it knew that much, running wouldn't matter. He stepped forward. The door groaned as he pushed it open further. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and mold. His flashlight revealed faded posters on the walls, old advertisements for motor oil and soda. The counter was covered in brittle newspapers, the top one dated August 14th, 1982. Jack's boots crunched over shattered glass as he moved deeper. His light swept across the room and caught something on the floor behind the counter. A radio, much older than his trucks, with chrome knobs and a cracked speaker. It was on. The same static hissed from it, but deeper, heavier, like it wasn't just sound but pressure, filling the room with a vibration that rattled in his chest. Then, his voice again. "Inside now, subject compliant." Jack staggered back, hitting the wall. "Stop it! Stop saying that!" The broadcast didn't stop. "Timeline holds. Event sequence beginning in 3, 2. The static roared, and for an instant Jack swore he heard screams buried beneath it. Dozens, maybe hundreds, overlapping like a chorus. 1. The flashlight died. The room went black, and something cold, damp, and human brushed against his hand in the darkness. The touch was brief, wet, clammy fingers grazing Jack's skin, but it was enough to send a surge of terror through him. He jerked back violently, crashing into a shelf that collapsed under his weight, cans clattering across the dusty floor. His flashlight was dead, but the old radio's glow cast a faint green haze over the room. Jack snatched it up, holding it like a weapon, even though it weighed no more than a loaf of bread. The static softened, and a voice bled through. His voice. "Contact achieved. Subject escalating." "No," Jack whispered, his throat dry. "That's not me. That's not me." Then, from the corner of the room, he heard breathing, slow, rattling, too deep to be human. "Who's there?" Jack barked, trying to sound bigger than the panic tearing through him. The breathing stopped, and then another voice, soft and warped like it was coming through layers of static, whispered back, "We told you. We've been waiting." Jack's heart hammered as he edged toward the door, the dead flashlight still clenched in his fist. The faint glow from the radio reflected off something on the far wall, a mirror cracked and streaked with dust. But what he saw in it stopped him cold. The reflection wasn't him. In the dim green light, the figure staring back wore his clothes, had his face, but its eyes were solid black. Its lips moved silently, just a fraction out of sync with his own. Jack staggered back, knocking over another chair. The radio crackled again. Subject recognition complete. Synchronization in progress. The figure in the mirror smiled. Jack threw the radio at the glass with a roar. The mirror shattered into a web of jagged cracks, shards raining across the floor. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, every broken piece reflected him. Dozens of Jacks, and every single one of them smiled. He bolted for the door, chest heaving. The night air hit him like salvation as he stumbled back into the parking lot. The station loomed behind him, quiet, as if it had swallowed the horror whole. Jack sprinted to his truck, yanked the door open, and jumped inside. He twisted the key in desperation. This time the engine roared to life. Relief flooded him, shaky and unsteady, but real. He slammed the truck into gear and sped back toward the highway, gravel spraying behind him. The radio lit up again. Subject attempting escape. Probability of success, 0. "Shut up!" Jack shouted, ripping at the dial, but it was fused in place, unmoving. The voice continued, calm, clinical. "Interstate accident confirmed. Fire confirmed. Next sequence, desert pursuit." Jack's grip tightened on the wheel. Pursuit? His headlights cut across the sand as the road curved. That's when he saw them. At first, he thought it was a mirage. A dozen figures standing in the sand just beyond the shoulder, unmoving. But as his lights passed over them, he realized they weren't mirages. They were real. Every single one of them had his face. They stood in silence, heads tilted, watching the truck race by. Jack's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "This isn't real! This isn't real!" But then a voice, not from the radio but from the back seat, whispered, "It's real!" Jack swerved violently, nearly losing control. He twisted in his seat, flashlight raised like a weapon. The back seat was empty, but the smell of damp earth lingered there, thick and suffocating. The desert blurred past as Jack pushed the truck faster, the speedometer climbing. His mind screamed at him to just keep driving, not to stop until he hit a real town, a real gas station, anything. The radio hissed again. "Warning, subject exceeding threshold, termination sequence imminent." Jack gritted his teeth. "To hell with you!" But before he could say more, the truck lurched violently to the right, as if something massive had slammed into it. Jack fought the wheel, swearing, tires screaming against the asphalt. His headlights flickered, and for a split second, something moved across the road ahead. Something big. A shadow with too many limbs crawling on all fours, its body stretched thin and wrong, like it had been pulled from a funhouse mirror. Jack's foot hit the brakes. The truck skidded sideways, tires biting into gravel. The headlights caught the creature fully now, and Jack's stomach flipped. Its face, it had his face, the same smile as the reflections in the mirror, wide and unnatural. The truck screeched to a stop just inches from the thing. It crouched in the middle of the road, head cocked, watching him. Jack's chest heaved, sweat dripping into his eyes. Then, in perfect unison, both the radio and the thing on the road spoke in the same calm, detached tone. "Sequence 3 complete, final phase beginning." The creature lunged straight at the windshield. The glass exploded into 1,000 shards as Jack threw his arms up to protect his face, and everything went black. Jack woke to the sound of buzzing. Not the radio this time, but something sharper, closer, like a swarm of flies right above his head. His eyes snapped open. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He wasn't in his truck anymore. The windshield, the wheel, the desert highway, gone. He was lying on his back, a harsh white light burning down into his eyes. His wrists and ankles ached, strapped tight to a cold metal table. The buzzing grew louder, filling the sterile air, vibrating through the walls. He turned his head, blinking against the light, and his stomach knotted. Speakers, dozens of them, lining the ceiling and walls, each crackling faintly with static. And from every speaker came whispers. Some were his own voice, others strangers, men, women, children, layered together in an endless chorus. "Subject contained. He's awake. Sequence 4 proceeding." Jack thrashed against the straps. "Let me go. I don't know who the hell you are." The whispers overlapped, calm and cold. "You know." A sound hissed from the far end of the room, a heavy door grinding open. Jack strained his neck to see, his pulse hammering. Something entered. At first it looked like a man, tall and gaunt, dressed in a dark coat. But as it stepped closer, the fluorescent lights revealed its face. Jack's breath caught. It was his face, but stretched, wrong, as though someone had molded clay into a poor imitation. Its skin sagged in places, too loose, and its eyes were wide black pools, swallowing all light. The thing leaned down until it was inches from him. Its lips didn't move, but Jack heard its voice inside his skull. "We warned you. We broadcast the truth. You tuned in." Jack shook his head violently. "This isn't real. I'm dreaming." The voice hissed, sharper now. "No, you're remembering." The figure stepped back. Its body flickered, like static on an old TV, and for a brief moment Jack saw dozens of them surrounding him, all with his face all shifting, overlapping, as if reality itself couldn't decide how many of them existed. The whispers from the speakers grew louder. "Test subject, 147 confirmed. Timeline stable. Integration commencing." Jack writhed, panic clawing up his throat. Integration? With what? The lights above dimmed, and a screen flickered to life on the wall. At first, it showed only static. Then, slowly, an image sharpened. A stretch of desert highway. Jack recognized it instantly. The same road he had been driving just hours earlier. But there was something wrong. The road was lined with bodies. Dozens of them, sprawled across the asphalt and sand. And every single one was him. Some broken and twisted from car wrecks, some burned, some bloated and pale as though drowned. All versions of Jack scattered like discarded mannequins. His stomach heaved, bile rising in his throat. No, this isn't me. The whispers merged into one voice, deep and final. This is you. Every version, every failure, every attempt. The screen flickered again. This time it showed him strapped to the table. Right now, this exact moment. Only, in the video, he wasn't alone. Dozens of figures leaned over him, all with his face, all smiling. He turned his head frantically. No one was there. Just the empty room, the speakers, the straps. When he looked back, the screen had changed once more. Now it showed his childhood bedroom. His mother's voice called softly from the hallway. His younger self sat on the floor playing with toy cars. Then the radio static cut through the scene. The boy froze, his head jerking up. From the hallway, a distorted version of his own voice whispered, "We've been waiting." The boy smiled. The screen went black. Jack's chest heaved. Sweat soaked his shirt, stinging his eyes. "Why me?" he croaked. The distorted version of himself stepped closer again, its black eyes unblinking. "Because you always listen. Across every life, every path, you tune in, you open the door, you invite us." Its hand rose, skeletal fingers brushing his temple. The moment it touched him, Jack felt a surge of noise flood his mind, like every radio station in existence screaming at once. Voices, static, news headlines, screams, laughter, an avalanche of sound tearing into his skull. He bucked against the straps, teeth clenched in agony. The whispers drowned everything. Integration complete. Broadcast expanding. The speakers roared. And then, silence. Jack gasped, chest heaving. The straps were gone. He sat upright, only to realize he was no longer in the sterile room. He was back in his truck. The windshield was intact. The desert stretched before him. The dashboard clock read 12:01 a.m. For a moment, he almost sobbed with relief. "Just a dream," he whispered. "Just a nightmare." Then the radio clicked on. "Good evening. Here are tonight's headlines for August 16th, 2025. Jack's blood froze. Subject integration successful. Broadcast live. And when he glanced at the rearview mirror, his reflection didn't move with him. It smiled. One night, the stars disappeared, and everyone who looked up at the sky vanished too. It began on an ordinary Tuesday in Cold Brook, a quiet little town tucked in the woods of upstate New York. The kind of town where nothing ever happened, where neighbors still left their doors unlocked and the diner still served free coffee refills. That night, the air was unusually crisp, the kind that sharpened the edges of sound. The crickets had fallen silent, as if even they sensed something was wrong. Around 10:47 p.m., without warning, the stars blinked out. Not one by one, not slowly, but all at once. The sky, usually speckled with 1,000 glittering lights, became a hollow, endless black. At first, people thought it was a power outage, some new kind of blackout affecting satellites or maybe a storm cloud covering the heavens. But there were no clouds. There was nothing. Just absence. And then, the screaming began. Old Mr. Barlow, who had been locking up his gas station, tilted his head back to see if the sky was cloudy. His wife said she saw his mouth open in horror. A second later, he was gone. Vanished. His keys clattered onto the pavement where he had been standing. The same thing happened to others across town. A young couple walking home from the diner. Teenagers lying on the hood of a car, stargazing. A jogger with earbuds in. One moment they were there, the next, they weren't. By 11 p.m., panic had spread. Word flew faster than the wind. Don't look at the sky. Windows were shut. Curtains were pulled. Parents yanked their kids inside. In minutes, Coldbrook transformed into a prison of locked doors and darkened rooms. Inside the old church basement, a group of survivors gathered. There were 17 of them, clutching flashlights, phones, anything that could keep the darkness at bay. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Sheriff Howard tried to take control. Listen, no one looks up. No one. Whatever's happening out there, it's tied to the sky. Stay indoors. Stay together. We'll figure this out. But his voice shook. He didn't believe his own words. Phones didn't work. No signal. Radios played only static. The outside world was silent. For the first time in living memory, Coldbrook felt like the only place left on Earth. In the back of the basement, 8-year-old Lily Johnson sat hugging her stuffed rabbit. She whispered to her older brother, her voice trembling. "Tommy, where did the stars go?" He didn't answer. He just held her tighter, staring at the boarded-up window. Hours dragged by like years. Nobody slept. Every creak of the wooden beams, every rattle of the wind outside felt like a threat. Then, just after 2 a.m., came the first knock. 3 sharp raps against the church door, too deliberate to be the wind. Everyone froze. Sheriff Howard motioned for silence. Slowly, he crept toward the door, pistol raised. "Who's there?" he called. No answer. Another knock. And then, a whisper, so faint it seemed to seep through the wood itself. "Let us in." It was Mrs. Barlow's voice, the wife of the man who had vanished hours ago. But everyone in that room knew she had disappeared too, minutes after her husband. Sheriff Howard backed away from the door, his face drained of color. "That's not her," he said firmly. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Let us in." Lily started crying. Her brother covered her ears, trying to shield her from the sound. No one moved for the rest of the night. They sat there in terrified silence, listening to the knocks come and go. When the weak light of dawn finally slipped through the cracks of the boards, the knocking stopped. For the first time since the stars vanished, people dared to hope. Maybe it was over. Maybe daylight meant safety. But then, little Lily, still clutching her rabbit, turned her head toward the boarded window. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. "They're moving closer," she whispered. Everyone turned toward her. "What's moving closer?" Sheriff Howard asked. Lily pointed toward the cracks in the boards. "The stars." And then the room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like the air had thickened, because when they looked, they saw it too. Faint pinpricks of light, not in the sky where stars should be, but low, much lower, as if something vast was descending toward the town. Nobody spoke after Lily's words. The pinpricks of light glowed faintly outside the church basement windows, drifting lower across the horizon like lanterns carried by unseen hands. They weren't twinkling like stars should. They pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. The survivors pressed against the far wall, terrified to get close. Sheriff Howard, his hand trembling on his pistol, whispered, "Don't look directly. Don't give them the chance." The group huddled together, clinging to silence until the lights drifted out of sight. But the damage was done. Nobody could shake the sense that the night sky itself had bent down to peer through the cracks of their boarded windows. At 6 a.m., The basement smelled of sweat and fear. Exhaustion weighed heavy, but no one dared close their eyes. Every time someone's head dipped forward, a noise outside snapped them back awake. It started with static. Tommy, Lily's brother, noticed it first. The old radio in the corner, long dead since the stars vanished, began to hiss. "Turn it off," muttered one of the men. Sheriff Howard shook his head. "It's already off." Everyone stared as the static grew louder, sharp like dry leaves scraping against glass. Beneath it, faintly, came something else. A voice. At first it was broken, disjointed, as though coming from 100 miles underwater. Then the words sharpened. "Cold. They are cold. Let us in." Lily whimpered. Tommy held her tight. The survivors exchanged horrified looks. The voice was the same as the knocking at the door the night before. Mrs. Barlow. Sheriff Howard yanked the cord from the wall. The static continued even without power. Another voice joined the first, and another. Soon the basement echoed with whispers, some familiar, some strange. Names were spoken, pleas, promises. "Open the door. We're still here. You don't want to be alone." Then came silence. Everyone sat frozen, as though even breathing too loudly might draw attention. It was Lily who broke it. She tilted her head, frowning. "Can't you hear them?" Tommy blinked. "Hear who?" "The voices," she whispered. "Not in the radio. Outside." The adults exchanged uneasy glances. Sheriff Howard finally muttered, "She's just scared, imagining things." But then they all heard it. From the cracks of the basement windows, the faint hum of whispers spilled in, low and layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once. No one dared go closer, until Peter Collins, a hot-headed mechanic, cursed under his breath. "I'm not sitting here waiting to die." He strode toward the window and pressed his ear against the boards. "Peter, don't," Howard warned. Too late. Peter's face went slack. His lips began to move, repeating the whispers in perfect unison. "They are closer. They are closer. They are closer." The others rushed to drag him away. It took 3 men to pry him off the boards. When they did, his eyes were wrong, completely white, as though something had scraped out the color. His voice was not his own. It was layered, inhuman. "You cannot hide." The lights outside flared brighter. The group panicked. Some screamed, some prayed, others pounded the church door, desperate to escape the basement. Sheriff Howard shouted over the chaos, "Stay together, don't look out there!" But the whispers inside Peter grew louder, rattling the wooden beams. His body convulsed, twitching like a puppet on strings. Then, with terrifying strength, he broke free from their grip and ran headlong toward the window. Before anyone could stop him, he ripped down the boards and looked straight into the starless sky. The moment his eyes met the dark, he vanished. Gone. No sound, no body. Only the hollow echo of whispers that seemed to sink deeper into the church walls. Silence swallowed the group. Sheriff Howard was shaking, his pistol useless at his side. "We can't stay here. If those things are moving closer, this church won't protect us." "Where do we go?" one woman demanded. "Out there? You saw what happened." Howard swallowed hard. "We find somewhere underground. A basement isn't enough. We need deeper." The suggestion was met with fear and anger, but no one had a better plan. Before they could argue further, the static returned. This time not from the radio, but from every phone, every speaker, every device in the basement. They all buzzed to life at once, crackling with the same layered voices. And through the static came a sound that froze everyone's blood. A child's giggle. Slowly they turned. Lily stood in the corner, her stuffed rabbit hanging limply in one hand. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her lips curved into a faint smile. "They said they're waiting," she whispered. Sheriff Howard's voice cracked. "Who's waiting, Lily?" Her head tilted unnaturally to the side. "The stars." The basement fell into stunned silence after Lily's words. Her little voice, calm, almost playful, hung in the air like a knife. Sheriff Howard stepped toward her cautiously. "Lily, sweetheart, what do you mean the stars are waiting?" She hugged her stuffed rabbit closer and blinked slowly, her eyes glassy. "They're whispering to me. They're saying my name." Her brother Tommy pulled her away protectively. "Stop talking to her like she's crazy. She's just a kid." But Lily wasn't trembling like the rest of them. She was calm, almost serene, as though the whispers soothed her. Before anyone could say more, a sound shuddered through the church. A long, low groan, as if the wooden beams were bending under impossible weight. Dust trickled from the ceiling. Then came the screams. Outside. The group froze. They could hear voices in the distance, crying for help, wailing, some shrieking in terror. But when they pressed their ears to the walls, they realized the voices weren't coming from far away. They were echoing from all directions. The voices belonged to the people who had already vanished. Mrs. Barlow, the young couple from the diner, the teenagers, Peter, the mechanic, all of them crying out together in a horrific chorus. "Help us! It hurts. We're still here." One woman, Margaret, covered her ears and sobbed. "This is hell. We're already in hell." Sheriff Howard barked at her, desperate to keep order. "No, we're alive, and we're going to stay alive. But we can't stay here. The church isn't safe." Tommy's voice cracked. "Go where? If we step outside, we'll disappear like the rest." Howard's jaw clenched. "Not if we don't look up. If we stay underground, sewers, storm drains, maybe we can move without being seen." It was insane. But insane was better than waiting to be swallowed alive. The group argued, but before a decision could be made, the basement lights flickered violently, then died. Darkness slammed down around them, and in that darkness, the whispers grew deafening. Lily giggled again, the sound chilling in the pitch black. They're inside now. Phones and flashlights snapped on in panic, beams of light cutting through the dark. But in the sudden illumination, something was wrong. There were fewer people than before. 17 survivors had huddled together in the basement hours ago. Now there were only 11. Howard's face went pale. "Where the hell is Margaret and Kyle and—" He stopped. Because where they had been sitting moments earlier, their clothes and belongings lay in heaps on the floor. No bodies, no blood, just gone. "They didn't scream," whispered Tommy. "They didn't even move." It was as if the whispers had plucked them out silently, without anyone noticing. Howard gritted his teeth. "We're leaving, now, before we're next." No one argued. Panic drove them. They climbed the basement stairs cautiously, shielding their eyes from the windows. The church above was colder than it should have been, and the stained glass windows glowed faintly, not from sunlight, but from that strange, pulsing light outside. They made it to the back door. Howard checked the street through a crack in the wood. The town was eerily still. Houses stood dark, cars abandoned in driveways. But the sky wasn't empty anymore. Low, above the rooftops, the pulsing lights drifted slowly like enormous lanterns, weaving between houses, searching. Howard hissed, "Keep your heads down. Stay quiet." They slipped into the alley, moving in a tight line. Lily hummed softly to herself as Tommy dragged her along, her little feet shuffling against the pavement. They hadn't gone a block when they noticed the road ahead didn't look right. It stretched farther than it should have. Houses repeated. The same white porch, the same dented mailbox, the same oak tree on the corner. They walked past it once, then again, then again. Tommy stopped dead. "We've been here before. We're going in circles." Howard cursed under his breath. "Keep moving." But as they walked, the air grew heavier. The houses blurred, melting into shadowed outlines as though the world beyond a certain point didn't exist at all. One man, Jacob, panicked and broke from the group. "I'm not doing this! I'm getting out of here!" He bolted down the street, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Jacob, stop!" Howard yelled. Too late. Jacob ran straight toward the shimmering edge of town, where the road dissolved into darkness. He vanished mid-step, his scream cut short. The group froze, horror written on their faces. Howard's voice was grim. The town, it's not real anymore. We're trapped. The survivors were trembling, whispering prayers, clutching each other. The lights in the sky drifted closer, their pulsing glow sweeping across the streets like searchlights. Lily lifted her face slightly, her eyes catching the faint glow. "They know we're awake," she whispered. And then, the ground beneath their feet trembled. Not like an earthquake, like something alive, shifting beneath them. The tremor rippled through Cold Brook like the heartbeat of something massive beneath the ground. Dust sifted from rooftops. Windows rattled. The survivors clung to one another as the vibration passed, leaving only silence in its wake. Sheriff Howard's knuckles were white around his pistol. "It's not the ground," he muttered. "It's them. They're pressing in on us." The survivors shuffled quickly into the nearest storm drain entrance, a rusted grate at the end of the street. One by one, they climbed down into the damp concrete tunnels, the air heavy with mold and stagnant water. Their flashlights carved trembling circles of light across the dripping walls. Down here, the whispers were muffled, but not gone. They seemed to echo through the pipes, vibrating through the metal, as though the entire town was one vast speaker. The group moved deeper, wading ankle-deep in water. Lily hummed softly again, her voice carrying eerily in the tunnel. "Stop that!" Tommy snapped, his nerves shredded. She looked up at him innocently. "I'm not humming. They are." Tommy's blood ran cold. Hours seemed to pass in that endless tunnel. But no matter which turn they took, they kept returning to the same place. A circular chamber with rusted ladders reaching upward. The tunnels were looping back on themselves. "We're trapped down here too," one man whispered. Howard forced calm into his voice. "No, we just haven't gone far enough. We keep moving." But doubt was spreading. They all felt it. The town wasn't obeying the rules of the world anymore. Then came the glow. A faint light seeped into the tunnel ahead, soft and golden, like dawn breaking underground. The group froze. "It's morning," Margaret's friend whispered hopefully. "We made it through the night. Maybe we're safe now." But Howard shook his head. His gut screamed otherwise. "That's not the sun." The glow brightened, flooding the tunnel until they were bathed in it. It wasn't warm, though. It was cold, sharp, searing their eyes with a strange geometric pattern that danced across the walls like veins of light. Tommy shielded Lily's face. "Don't look." The group turned away, but the patterns clung to their vision like afterimages burned into their retinas. "Those shapes," one of the men gasped. "I've seen them before. I used to work at the observatory outside Albany. The telescope recorded these same patterns years ago. We thought it was interference." Howard's voice cracked. "What kind of interference?" The man shook his head. "Not interference. A signal. Something watching us." The whispering in the tunnel rose to a roar, layered voices overlapping until it sounded like the entire world was speaking at once. "Closer. Closer. Closer." And then the light surged, filling the chamber with blinding brilliance. When it faded, 2 more survivors were gone. Their clothes and shoes lay where they had stood seconds earlier, wet and lifeless. "Jesus Christ," Howard breathed. His leadership was crumbling. "We can't stay here. We're being picked off no matter where we go." Tommy's voice trembled. "Then what do we do?" Howard's eyes darted toward the ladder leading upward. "We go higher. A roof, a tower, something. If they want us underground, we do the opposite." The group protested, but Howard climbed first, his boots clanging against the rusted rungs. One by one, the others followed, desperation driving them. They emerged into open air on the edge of town, climbing out of a manhole. The night hadn't lifted. The sky was still black. But it wasn't empty anymore. The lights, hundreds of them, hung low above the town, swaying gently, each one the size of a house. They pulsed with that same heartbeat rhythm, closer than ever before. Tommy whispered, "They're not stars." The survivors huddled against a brick wall, shielding their eyes from the sky. But the pulsing glow was everywhere, bleeding into every shadow. And then, across the horizon, something impossible happened. A sunrise. Not in the east. Not from the sun. The light came from the ground itself, swelling upward, spilling across the streets and rooftops like molten gold. The earth was glowing from beneath, casting long, skeletal shadows across the town. The survivors stared in horror. It wasn't sunlight. It was something alive. Howard raised his pistol at nothing, his voice barely more than a rasp. "We're not standing on Earth anymore." As if in answer, the ground trembled again. Stronger this time, a deep, shuddering vibration that rattled bones. Somewhere far below, something vast was stirring. And then Lily, her small face lit by the false dawn, smiled faintly. "They're hungry," she whispered. The earth split open with a deafening crack. Have you ever heard the sound of a sky screaming? That's what it felt like when the black veil in the heavens split wider. No sound filled the air, but every nerve in Maya's body vibrated as if the stars themselves were shrieking in agony. The townsfolk ran. They clawed at one another, stumbling into the woods, into the river, into anything that promised escape. But escape from what? The sky had no edges. The blackness was swallowing everything. Maya clutched Jacob's arm. His lantern light flickered wildly, struggling against the unnatural darkness. "The journal," he muttered, fumbling with the leather-bound pages he'd ripped from her house. It says the veil is weakest at the well." "The well?" Maya's heart pounded. "The one behind the church?" Jacob nodded, his face pale and trembling. "It isn't a well. It's a door. A door they buried to keep them from crawling out." The ground trembled violently, sending cracks through the cobblestone streets. The cracks weren't random. They were patterns, jagged lines forming a shape, a massive circle as if something beneath the town was pressing upward, ready to break through. "We don't have a choice," Jacob said. "If that door opens, if the veil tears all the way, it's over. They'll take everything, every star, every light, every soul." Maya forced herself to move. Together they stumbled through the chaos, past terrified villagers, past burning houses where lantern oil had spilled. The air reeked of smoke and iron. The church loomed ahead, its bell still swinging though no one pulled the rope, tolling as if mourning the sky. The well sat behind it, old and forgotten. Moss covered its stone lip, and the wood lid was nailed shut, sealed with rusted iron bands. But as Maya drew closer, she felt the pull, the same gnawing sensation that had haunted her since childhood. This was the place she had dreamed of without knowing why. The journal's brittle page slipped in Jacob's shaking hands. He read aloud, voice cracking. "When the stars begin to fade, when the sky bleeds its light, the seal must be broken, and the watcher must be faced. If the door is left to open on its own, all will be devoured." Maya stared at him. "Faced? What does that mean?" Before Jacob could answer, the ground shuddered again. The lid of the well groaned, iron bands snapping one by one. A foul gust of air burst upward, like breath from something vast and ancient beneath the soil. "We have to open it before it does," Jacob shouted, voice nearly drowned by the unnatural wind. "It says the seal must be broken willingly. Otherwise—" The last band snapped. Maya screamed as Jacob grabbed the edge of the lid. "Help me!" Together they heaved the heavy wood aside. The stench rolled out stronger now. Wet stone, burning metal, and something else. Something alive. The well was not a well. It was a staircase. A spiral of stone steps descending into endless black. Maya's stomach twisted. She wanted to run, but something stronger than fear pulled her toward it. The pull she'd felt all her life surged now, undeniable. This was where it wanted her to go. The journal slipped from Jacob's hands into the abyss, its pages fluttering as it fell. No sound ever returned. Maya's whisper cracked her throat. "This is what's been calling me." Jacob's eyes widened. "What?" "My dreams, the darkness, the whispers. It wasn't madness, it was this place." She looked at him, her face wet with tears she hadn't noticed. "It chose me." Jacob grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. "No, Maya. That's what it wants you to think. That's how it pulls you in. You're not chosen. You're being lured." But even as he spoke, the ground split wider. A massive circle of stone lifting around the town. Screams echoed in the distance as entire buildings crumbled into the abyss. The veil in the sky cracked further, the black void pushing through like a tide. Maya knew then. They had no time. Whatever the watcher was, whatever the door concealed, it was rising. She gripped Jacob's hand tightly. "Then we go down." His face drained of color. "Maya, no." Her voice was steel. "If this is the door, then something on the other side wants in. If we wait, it'll rip through on its own. The journal said it has to be faced. I'll face it." Jacob hesitated, trembling between terror and duty. Finally, with a broken sigh, he nodded. "Then I go with you." Together, hand in hand, they descended the cold, spiraling steps. Each echo of their feet sounded too loud, too hollow, as if the stone itself were hollowed-out bone. The air grew colder, wetter, thick with whispers. Not voices, not words, but impressions, like 1,000 minds brushing against theirs. Maya stumbled, clutching her head. She could feel them, pressing, prodding, waiting. At the bottom of the staircase stood a massive stone door carved with constellations, or what used to be constellations because the stars engraved on its surface were fading, dimming one by one just like the sky above. Her hand lifted on its own, trembling inches from the door. Jacob's voice shook behind her. "Maya, don't..." Before he could finish, the constellations flared. A deep groan rumbled through the chamber, and from beyond the stone, something knocked. Once, twice. Then a voice, smooth and echoing, slipped through the cracks. "At last, the starborn child has come home." Maya froze. "Starborn?" Jacob staggered back, pale as death. "Maya, what are you?" The stone door split open with a thunderous crack, revealing blinding blackness inside. Blackness alive, swirling like a sea of shadows. And something began to step through. The storm above was silent now. No thunder, no lightning, no movement, just an infinite ceiling of black. For the first time since the night the stars vanished, the air felt unnaturally still, as though the world itself had stopped breathing. Elena, David, and Marcus huddled in the broken sanctuary of St. Bridget's Church, the altar candles casting long, nervous shadows on the walls. The choir members, those who still remained, sat in silence, their eyes glassy, their bodies trembling as if they knew what was about to come. Marcus clutched the journal they had stolen from the observatory, his hands shaking. He had translated most of it now, and the truth was worse than anything they had imagined. "The stars didn't die," he whispered hoarsely. "They were taken." Elena leaned forward. "Taken by what?" Marcus swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he spoke. "By us. Or what came before us. The astronomers who built this observatory centuries ago weren't just watching the sky. They were part of something older, something that worshipped what lived in the dark between the stars." David frowned. "You're saying people, humans, summoned this?" "No." Marcus shook his head violently. "Not summoned, fed. The journal says the stars were like locks, barriers holding something back. Each one kept the dark at bay. And the choir, our choir, they've been singing the same hymn for generations, never knowing the words were keeping the locks intact. But when the melody changed, his voice broke. They opened the door. A deep vibration rolled through the church walls, like the sound of a mountain shifting in its sleep. The candles flickered, though no wind touched them. Outside, the air seemed to grow heavier. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. You mean the stars didn't just vanish? They were pulled out of the sky. Marcus nodded slowly, one by one, into the thing that waits behind it. The silence in the church was unbearable. Even the choir members, those pale, broken survivors, seemed to realize the weight of his words. Their lips trembled, as though fighting the urge to sing again. David stood abruptly, pacing. So what now? We just sit here and wait for the end? There's one passage left, Marcus muttered, thumbing through the brittle pages. It talks about a counter-verse, a final hymn, but it's incomplete. The last page was torn out. Another tremor shook the earth, harder this time. The stained glass windows rattled in their frames. Elena felt her chest tighten with fear. Outside, something vast and formless pressed against the horizon, like a ripple in reality itself, a shadow larger than any storm. David pointed to the choir members. Then they have to remember it. They've sung these hymns their whole lives. Maybe they know the missing words. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling as she addressed the silent group. Do you remember the last verse? The one that closes the hymn? The choir's leader, an old woman with sunken eyes, slowly raised her head. Her lips parted, and in a voice that was almost not her own, she whispered, "There is no last verse. There was never meant to be." The church grew deathly cold. Marcus's face went pale. No, that can't be right. The woman's eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, like fragments of the stars that had disappeared. The hymn was not a prayer. It was a promise. We did not sing to protect you. We sang to prepare you. Elena's blood ran cold. Prepare us for what? The woman smiled, a ghastly, hollow smile. For their return. The church doors blew open with a deafening crack. Wind howled in, but it wasn't wind. It was voices. 1,000 overlapping whispers hissing through the night air. The sound crawled into their ears, into their bones, searing through their minds like fire. David fell to his knees, clutching his head. Marcus screamed, slamming the journal shut as though it could shield him. Elena forced herself to look outside, and she saw it. The horizon was splitting, not breaking like rock, not tearing like cloth, but splitting like the skin of the world itself. Through the wound poured an ocean of black crawling tendrils of void that absorbed all light. And within that darkness, shapes began to move. They weren't monsters, they weren't even alive. They were concepts given form, shadows too vast for her mind to comprehend. Some had wings that blotted out what little sky was left, others eyes that stretched across the heavens, and deep within their shifting bodies burned fragments of starlight, the stars themselves, stolen and imprisoned. Elena staggered back, whispering, "The stars weren't destroyed. They were consumed." The church shook violently, beams cracking, stone crumbling. The whispers grew louder, now forming words, though not in any human tongue. The choir rose to their feet, swaying as if in trance, their voices merging with the whispers outside. "They are not here to destroy," the old woman intoned. "They are here to collect." Marcus shouted over the noise, his face contorted in horror. "Collect what?" The woman's glowing eyes turned on him. Us. At that moment, the last candle died. The world was swallowed in absolute darkness. The stars had never guided humanity. They had only marked the time until the owners of the sky came back to reclaim what was theirs. And now, the sky was empty. Forever.